We are going to go ahead and call our meeting to order tonight. I've got 5:28 p.m. Central Standard Time, and this is the Kennedale City Council. This is a special meeting on Monday, July 15th, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. We are in City Council Chambers, 405 Municipal Drive, Kennedale, Texas 76060. Madam Secretary, may I get a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Mayor Pro Tem Michaels.
Here.
Place 1 Glover.
Present.
Place 2 Kobeck.
Present.
Place 4 Gary.
Present.
Place 5 Navarez.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. At this time, we're going to do our invocation and our pledges. I'm going to ask Councilman Navarez to lead us in our prayer, and then Councilman Michaels will lead us in our pledges. Please stand. Thank you, gentlemen. So at this time, we're going to move on into our presentations. And we've got a proclamation and a resolution for two very special young men. And we're very honored to have Mr. Perez from Representative Cook's office here tonight. He's also going to assist in this time. So as we move into this, I want to say we've got two very special guests with us tonight. And these are two young men that are not only very successful in their studies, athletic careers, but they have very bright futures. And they're great young men, and most importantly to me, they have a heart of serving others. And so tonight we're going to honor them. And this is an honor not only to them, but to their parents. And Dr. and Mrs. Crum and Mr. and Mrs. Dees, congratulations for raising such fine young men, such great families, and we're honored that you guys are residents of our city. So to Evan and Josh, I'd say serving others is very admirable, and I want to challenge you both as you go through life to keep that up, because life happens, you get busy, but continue that heart for serving others. And I want to congratulate you, hats off to you, and look forward to all the great things that you got in your future. So, as we get started, I'm going to ask Mr. Perez to come up and he'll present, and then we've got a proclamation each for the city. We'll do pictures. But one thing in reading your bios, I would say to the audience is, I think they've got two great colleges they want to go to, but I have to say, I think you both would look better in burnt orange. So that's, be that as it may. So at this time, Mr. Perez, you want to come on up?
You can hear me? There. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Again, my name is Daryl Perez, and I'm with Texas State Representative David Cook's office for District 96. And it is an honor for me to be here to be able to present these resolutions to you. Serving in the community as young adults, statistics say that, that those who volunteer as young adults are 81% more likely to volunteer as adults and to contribute to organizations and charitable organizations. So it's inspiring to see you young men do what you do and excel at what you do, and we're very, very proud of you. So I have two resolutions that we had drawn up for you, and I'll present those to you. And I'll read the first one. It states, whereas Joshua Dees, a rising sophomore at the Oak Ridge School in Arlington, has distinguished himself through his academic achievements and service to his community. And whereas this notable young Texan has earned a place on the A honor roll at his school, and he has served his peers as freshman class president and as a member of the Black Student Association. Moreover, he received a gold medal for his performance on the National Spanish exam, and he's explored his interest in music by studying both piano and viola. A standout athlete as well, he is a varsity letterman in 4 different sports and has given generously of his time as a mentor to younger athletes. After graduating, he hopes to play football at the collegiate level for the University of Oregon and to pursue a career as an aerospace engineer. And whereas outside of school, Joshua has set an inspiring example through his volunteer efforts. He has participated in a number of food drives and food banks throughout Fort Worth and Arlington, and he has further donated his time to Wreaths Across America, Habitat for Humanity, and First St. John Cathedral, where he is a member of the social media team. In recognition of his many good works, he was honored with the President's Volunteer Service Award at the silver level. And whereas Joshua Dees has demonstrated remarkable initiative, compassion, and dedication in all his endeavors, and he is a source of great pride to his family and community, now therefore be it resolved that Joshua Dees be honored for his accomplishments and exemplary community service, and that he be extended sincere best wishes for the future. Representative Cook, House District 96. And for Evan, whereas Evan Crum, a rising sophomore at the Oak Ridge School in Arlington, has distinguished himself through his service to his community, and whereas this notable young Texan has logged more than 100 volunteer hours over the past school year, and he was recently honored for this impressive feat with the President's Volunteer Service Gold Award. He has devoted his time to youth camps, his church, and the Key Club at his school. And whereas Evan is a multi-sport athlete who plays football, soccer, and baseball, and he also enjoys furthering his physical fitness through weight training, after graduating, he hopes to study engineering at Texas A&M University. And whereas Evan Crum has demonstrated remarkable initiative, compassion, and dedication in all his endeavors, and he is a source of great pride to his family and community, now therefore be it resolved that Evan Crum be honored for his exemplary community service and that he be extended sincere best wishes for the future. Again, State Representative David Cook. May I approach, please?
And we'll do another round of photos and everything here. I'll present them individually, and then each of you guys, and we can get families in and Mr. Perez as well. So, all right. So at this point, I'm going to do our proclamation and resolution honoring Mr. Evan Crum for receiving the Presidential Volunteer Gold Award for Community Service. Whereas Evan Crum has been awarded the Presidential Volunteer Gold Award for Community Service, and whereas Evan Crum is attending the Oak Ridge School as a sophomore, where he's a 3-sport athlete participating in football, soccer, and baseball, and whereas Evan Crum has earned the Presidential Gold Award by volunteering more than 100 hours over the previous school year, and whereas Evan Crum earned his volunteer hours by serving at youth camps, at his church, and volunteering through the Key Club, and whereas it is with great pride that I congratulate Evan Crum on his great accomplishment to this community. It takes a great deal of effort and determination to accomplish such a challenging number of community service hours, and this achievement signifies a resolute will and unwavering diligence of which you can be extremely proud. And whereas the City of Kennedale joins me in offering our congratulations, now therefore, I, Brad Horton, Mayor of the City of Kennedale, on behalf of the Kennedale City Council, staff, and citizens, do hereby recognize Evan Crum. All right, so next, we'll do a proclamation and resolution honoring Mr. Joshua Dees for receiving the Presidential Volunteer Bronze Award for Community Service. Whereas Joshua Dees has been awarded the Presidential Volunteer Bronze Award for Community Service, and whereas Joshua Dees is attending Oak Ridge School as a sophomore and served as the freshman class president, and whereas Joshua Dees is a member of the Black Student Association and an A honor roll student, and whereas Joshua Dees has received numerous honors and awards, including a gold medal recipient of the National Spanish Exam, 4 sport varsity letterman, and a silver medal for the President's Volunteer Service Award for his community service. And whereas it is with great pride that I congratulate Joshua Dees on his great commitment to his community. It takes a great deal of effort and determination to accomplish such a challenging number of community service hours. This achievement signifies a resolute will and unwavering diligence of which you can be extremely proud. And whereas the City of Kennedale joins me in offering our congratulations, now therefore I, Brad Horton, Mayor of the City of Kennedale, on behalf of the Kennedale City Council, city staff, and citizens, do hereby recognize Mr. Joshua Dees. All right, and again, congratulations to the Crum and Dees family. Very nice job, and we're honored to present and honor you guys tonight. So thank you guys for joining us. So our next presentation is from Jodan Bobbitt, Chief Appraiser and Executive Director of Tarrant Appraisal District, and introduction to the City Council.
Good evening. My name is Jodan Bobbitt. I'm the new Chief Appraiser for Tarrant Appraisal District. I've been here since February 1st. The Board of Directors hired me to hopefully improve relationships with the entities and the taxpayers. A lot of that is through communication and transparency. So that's kind of why we're making the rounds, meeting all the entities, hopefully getting some feedback from y'all as far as what we can do better to improve kind of our posture. Part of that, March 21st, we did suffer a ransomware attack that was in the news. For the most part, we were recovered within 25 days as far as what the public could see. We try to focus priority-wise on our interfacing with the public. We want to try to minimize that. Overall, our appraisal database was not compromised. We did have one file share that was compromised, and so that there ended up being about 300 people that were affected. But we did have a set of attorneys that notified those people, notified them what information was compromised. Most of it had to do with a homestead exemption form that the state has. It has a place for birthdays and social security numbers. And so on those, we don't really have a use for a social security number, but if it was still on that form, it may have been compromised. But all those 300 people were notified. Overall, we've fixed that process, so now we redact those images when they're stored in our system. And so we're trying to move forward and trying to make it more secure, so we eliminate the issue in the future. The Board of Directors has authorized purchasing roughly $1.5 million worth of equipment and software, so we're trying to move forward. There's been a history of being overly fiscally conservative. So my example I like to use is we still had Windows XP machines connected on the system and our network. And so we had some major issues that we had to fix. That wasn't the main reason we were compromised, but it just kind of gives you an idea of the age of our equipment that we have. And so we are moving forward to fix that. Part of it, with the $1.5 million, we did not come back to the entities asking for any additional funds. We're doing that out of our reserve account. And so we know it needs to be fixed, but we're not trying to ask for any additional funds from y'all or the taxpayers to do that. Our strategic goal is moving forward into a cloud-hosted environment. We want to be able to keep all the different systems separated, so if anything ever does happen, it doesn't affect everything else. We're also replacing our new appraisal system. So right now, well, since 2014, there's a system called Aumentum that's kind of been in the news. It has kind of been the bane of our existence. And so we're trying to replace that system. Hopefully it'll provide better service to the taxpayers and to the entities, the reports that we provide to y'all. And so, but that system does cost roughly $3 million per year. The current system is about $300,000 per year, but we get what we pay for, which is very little. But also, that kind of goes into our budget moving forward. I think we've sent our budget out to all the entities. So our overall operational expenses we're trying to hold at zero, a 0% increase. But the $3 million for new Canvas system does drive overall our total budget up about 16%. And so we know that it is an impact to the entities and everybody else, but we're trying to minimize it everywhere else we can. We do still plan to certify July 25th. So we will be certifying on time. So the ransomware event did not overall affect our major processes that we interact with y'all with. So we will have those numbers ready to y'all to certify. Right now, we do have around 206,000 protests, which is on par for last year. With that, about 90% of the protests are resolved by my staff, so they don't have to go to the appraisal review board. And so we're able to resolve those. And so our goal is to be the kinder, friendlier TAD and try to get everything resolved easier for people. There have been instances of a 4-hour wait time in the stories in the past couple of years. Right now, the average wait time is about 15 minutes. So people, when they come in to see us, they're usually in and out. There's usually about 2 people waiting when I walk through the front lobby. And so we're trying to keep in mind the burden on taxpayers when they have to take off work or come visit with us. But overall, those are the main things I wanted to discuss. If you have any questions, we're here to answer questions and address any issues.
Are there any questions? Comments?
I think I gave everybody my card, so if y'all come up with something later on, just please reach out. So we appreciate y'all's time.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Yes, sir.
Next, we're going to move to our public comment section of the meeting. The Kennedale City Council welcomes comments from the public. Those wishing to speak must sign in prior to the start of the meeting. Speakers may speak on any topic, whether on the agenda or not. The Kennedale City Council cannot act upon, discuss issues raised, or make any decisions at this time. Speakers under citizens' comments shall observe a 3-minute time limit. Inquiries regarding matters not listed on this agenda may be referred to staff for research and/or possible future action by the board. Madam Secretary, do we have speakers?
No, sir, we do not.
Does anybody wish to speak at this time? Nobody's making eye contact. Going once, going twice. All right. So now we're going to move into our regular session. And the first item we have up is reports and announcements. And we're going to start off with announcements from our city council. And I believe I started with Councilman Glover last time. Please correct me if I'm mistaken. So I'll start with Councilman Navarez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a few events I did this past month, a couple of them off the top of my head, the library events at the Lego Day and the Fort Day. Both were amazing, but I especially liked the Fort Day, and so did the kids. We got to build a fort out of a bunch of boxes, so I hear they save boxes over the years, so if you got some extra cool big boxes, maybe snag it by the library. I'm sure they could store it in Daryl's office. And then I went to the retirement of Judge Carr. They actually have a new courtroom, so he's the first painting in that courtroom. Judge Carr has served this community for over 30 years. He's one of the first judges in Tarrant County to actually enact programs for veterans and police and fire and mental health. And he's been a great judge in the community, and he's going to be really missed, but I look forward to seeing him as a visiting judge in the future. I went to Lori Boyd's taco party for KPD, her appreciation dinner. It was really good to meet some of their new new employees with the KPD. I went to the barbecue showdown where I was supposed to do beans and ribs as a judge, but I actually had to miss the beans because of the train. So by the time I got around town and around the train, I missed the opening for that. But
I ate
got to-
yours, by the way.
But I got to eat some of the chicken, and we did the ribs, and I managed to take one of the winning ones home. So I was really excited to eat that last night for dinner as well. I had a great time July 4th, which is my favorite holiday. It looked like everybody in DFW had left town, so I was at the lake and I was downtown at Panther Pavilion, and it was not busy at all in either places. So it was a breath of fresh air to get out and not be crowded and have a good time for the 4th. And then I've met with some of the new businesses that are coming in town and look forward to doing some of these spotlights coming up in the next week. Thank you.
Councilman Gary?
Just a few things. Back on the third Friday of last month, I spent the morning passing out the food boxes to the senior drive-through center. Miss Rita was very helpful with that. Obviously, she's in charge over there in our fire department. About 6 or 8 firefighters showed up and helped pass out those 30, 40 boxes to the seniors that came out to get those. Hung around for a little while, watched some bingo and stuff like that, but the games they were playing, but it was a good time. On the 26th, we had our meet and greet here for the city council, met maybe 5 to 8 residents, made some good contact, had a lot of discussions about, infrastructure, roads, traffic, business growth here, how we can bring some businesses in here, so that was a good event. This last week, I was driving around town, did visit Smiley's Racing Products down the street, spoke to them. We talked a lot about the speed track and the growth of business that we need up and down Kennedale Parkway and things like that. So that was a good thing. I missed the barbecue cook-off. I had to work, but hopefully next year I'll plan a little better and make sure I'm off that Saturday, so I can go out there and do that. But that's about it. Pretty soft June.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem?
Well, I didn't do a whole lot this last month, but I did get to attend with city staff the active shooter training, CPR and AED training. If you don't know CPR, I advise you to take a course because you never know, you can save someone's life. I did go to the meet and greet on the 26th, and of course, y'all know me, barbecue. I spent 2 days out there, so I enjoyed every bit of it. We had 35 teams, and compared to last year, it was 21 teams. So next year, we're hoping to be bigger, so.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Kobeck?
Well, since I just came on board, I don't have quite the itinerary that a few other people do, but I was able to attend the June 26th meet and greet, got a chance to meet some residents and hear their concerns and talk with them about the things that they see as the vision for Kennedale, which was a very, very enlightening experience. Also on July 9th, had a chance to visit with some folks over at Precinct 2 regarding county and city road and bridge partnerships and how we can collaborate with them to take care of maybe some of our infrastructure concerns. Have had a chance to speak on the phone with Mr. Zintek with Union Pacific regarding some of our railroad concerns and trying to maybe get the ball rolling on getting some assistance with some of those blockage issues.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilman Glover?
So like Councilman Neverez, I also got caught behind the train on the way to the barbecue and missed the beans. So great turnout, got some feedback.
8 years too.
Thank you, Mayor. Great chicken. We did get to settle on that. The feedback we got, we'll share that later on when the time is right, but great turnout, so excellent. Other than that, I left town for July 4th. You're welcome, Jeff. No other updates. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So updates from the mayor. These guys have said a whole lot, so I just want to say a couple of things. And one is in reference to the barbecue showdown. I do want to congratulate our city manager and our city staff. You guys all did a phenomenal job. It was a wonderful event. Had to leave early. We had a lot going on that day, but just hats off, guys. And those kinds of things bring people together. And you know, I mean, it was just an overall great job. And hats off to you guys. So give yourselves a round of applause. I thought it was really nice. So. Additionally, I do want to thank Kennedale Speedway Park. And, you know, they hosted it, obviously, and to Kennedale Speedway Park and our racetracks, that's a major part of our city's heritage. And, you know, I want to thank them for having us, obviously. And, you know, we as a city, you know, we look forward to being good partners with them and look forward to continuing that both now and into the future. So thank you again to Kennedale Speedway Park. Additionally, these guys have talked, I've been having conversations with Precinct 2. And, you know, we've got a lot going on with them. We're continuing to work with Precinct 2 and look forward to continuing those discussions and looking for additional opportunities to work with them in the future. And, you know, certainly thank those guys down there. They work hard. They do a lot, as do our city employees. And then, you know, just we had the meet and greet for the business leaders, and then we had coffee with our citizens a couple weeks ago, and those were really great. Getting a chance to kind of sit down and talk with people one-on-one, and hope to be doing more of those in the future and going forward. So, you know, keep your eyes out for those. I'd like to do them quarterly, and it's just a good way to come in informally and talk to everybody. And we learn a lot of ideas. We learn issues that are impacting you, and so I'd really encourage you to take advantage of those opportunities when they come up. So thank you all, and Mr. City Manager.
I'm good. Thank you for the opportunity.
Mr. Horton, feels like we've been spending a lot of time together lately, budget-wise and everything, so.
If that's a cue to be quick, I'll take it. Okay, I have 2 reports to present tonight. I have our monthly report, and then we'll hit on the quarterly investment report immediately afterwards. But with our monthly report, just keeping in mind we are 75% complete through the year. Our main source of revenue are property taxes. If you see where we are to budget, we're actually a little bit over 100% to budget. So congratulations for us on that. That's actually fairly common. We have some catching up on property taxes, and then once protests become, decided on, we've collected over 100% of our expectation the past couple of years. Moving down to sales tax, we see we're 64.9% to budget. This was the first month I've been able to pick up on us trending ahead of the previous year. So we're looking really strong on sales tax and looking forward to continuing that for FY25. But there will be some slight modifications to the 25 revenue based on this updated trend. You can see last year, as far as percent to collection, we're at 55.7, which again, right now we are a little bit ahead of that. Our general fund expenditures year to date, they're 70.2%. Again, with 75% of the year complete, we are spending less than we expected to. Our reserve right now is at 176. So we are having that trend slightly, I mentioned in previous months, where that number is going to get smaller the further along we go throughout the year. But we are still trending to be ahead of the 105 days that we had on our budget. Moving to water sewer fund on page 2. Actually, I'll do the stormwater fund so it goes in order. So that's the top one, Fund 7. Our drainage fees collected, they're at 77.1% of budget. And our stormwater expenditures are at 76, so both of those are in line with expectation. Again, with that, we are at 1,415 days working capital. So it's, again, another trend on that. We're just ahead of pace. Water sewer fund, more of the same. Our service sales are a little bit behind budget, but that's also a fund that our income isn't the same month over month. We're expecting to see more income throughout the summer as it gets hot and people are watering their lawns and so forth. So even though that's behind the 75%, I don't see a need to be concerned on that end at all. And our expenditures year-to-date are at 83.6% to budget. Again, that's just not something that I see a big concern on. Going all the way to the back to page 8 for our EDC. Since the EDC sales tax trends just along with our general fund sales tax, it's more of the same on that end. We're at 70.2% of total budget. Mentioning receipts are delayed. So prior year sales tax, we were at 63.1% of receipts. So we're still ahead of trend or ahead of our budget on that. Our rental fees are at 79.7, so we're keeping pace with our rental income. Our operations at 78.7%. I do also want to remind there was a land purchase in there, so that's why we're ahead of the 75% trend. Our EDC shopping center is at 41.4. I'll mention again that that's because we haven't made some building renovations that were in the budget. Do we have any questions on the monthly report?
So just for the record, you don't see anything that's concerning to you?
No, sir, I do not.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Okay. So on our quarterly investment report, I'm skipping ahead to page 3 just to show the breakdown that you can see our portfolio parameters, and we are operating within those parameters. You can see that our portfolio right now is extremely conservative, but that's also by design, and it's per the guidelines that we have through the PFIA and our charter, a Public Funds Investment Act. Our total book value on June 30th was $38,645,919.19. On page 4, there's a breakdown. The main thing I want to point out is something that we also hit on when I presented this before. The unrealized income on both of the charts on our quarter ended and our fiscal year to date, that's based on bonds that we have not sold. As far as the R.W. Baird and Company, where we see it's really an unrealized loss, the maturity date on those bonds is extended further out. So if we were to sell those at the end of June, we would have seen a loss. We've made a commitment to hold those for an extended amount of time. So there will be a point where that number will flip and it'll look more like our Frost brokerage where we have an unrealized gain. We just need to wait till we get closer to a maturity date to see that loss flip to a gain. As you mentioned, Mayor, you've heard a lot of me talk the past 8 days, so I will stop there and open the floor for questions.
Any questions?
Are we still on track to get the new TAD numbers in the next week or 2 weeks?
Yep, we're on track, and they'll, as Mr. Bobbitt mentioned, we'll get the final numbers on the 25th. So that's going to be the biggest driver on how we can make adjustments to the budget draft that was presented last week. But that also is a state legal requirement, so I wasn't expecting him to say he would be late on that. That would be a huge issue.
Crossing my fingers for you.
I think you said 206,000 protests. You're going to be doing some overtime, I guess, to get that.
That's been historically, whenever I looked at last year to this year, that's been the biggest difference why we haven't really been able to pinpoint what that number will be tighter than we have, is those protests with that extended deadline. They're just more open now than there were when the last numbers were released, or the June numbers last year. So we'll see what the end of the month holds, but I'm expecting it to look more different this year than it did last.
Any other questions? No?
Thank you.
You have it easy tonight. You don't have to talk for 5 straight hours like last week.
Y'all get a lot of me once a year, and then I just keep it quiet the rest of the time.
Thank you, sir. We're going to now move to our consent agenda. Does anybody have anything that they would like to pull? Going once? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
Do we have a second?
Mr. Mayor, I second.
All in favor? For the record, all opposed with a like sign. Madam Secretary, the motion passes unanimously. Next, we're going to move to our items for individual consideration, discussion, and/or action. And our first is we're going to discuss and consider action to approve the proposed new water and wastewater rates as presented in the 2024 Water and Wastewater Rate Study and Financial Forecast. Mr. Horton, welcome back.
Thank you. After a brief break. Yes, I'm introducing Jason Gray. He's here with Wildan. And if you remember, this is the second presentation, second time they'll be here to present this information. And this is all part of that 2023 bond issuance and getting that water sewer fund where it will support the debt that we issued. Year one, the general fund supported that debt, but the idea is for the $15 million on the Interceptor project that the water sewer fund, Fund 10, does support this debt on its own.
Thank you, John. Do you have the presentation handy? So as the presentation is coming up, I'll reintroduce myself. I'm Jason Gray with Wildan Financial Services, office at 5500 Democracy in Plano. And we do a variety of different financial services for cities and counties across the country. Utility rate studies being a big portion of what we do. We did present to the city back in January, and then some additional issues with one of your large partners, City of Arlington, came up roughly sort of around that same time frame. And as we were waiting to see how that issue resolved itself, we've been continually updating the numbers as we've gone. And so what we've got for you tonight, we believe is ready for action, and it is ready for your consideration. Be happy to take any questions once we move through the presentation that we've got. There we go. Saw it for a minute anyway. All right. So I'll try to make this relatively brief, but there is a lot of detail. And if there are any questions at any time, either during the presentation and then obviously afterwards, we'll leave some time for questions at that point as well. Go on, next slide. We've got 5 different pieces of this presentation. We'll talk a little bit about a background on your utility rates, your customers and volumes, what your cost of service is, and that's just what it sounds like. It's what is the cost to the city of Kennedale to provide the service to your water and wastewater customers, and that's what we base our rate plans on, and then proposed rate plan, and then we'll summarize the presentation. Next slide, go ahead, one more. So as we look at water and wastewater utility trends, not only here locally in Kennedale and the DFW area as a whole across the state and across the nation, what we see is average utility rates have been increasing at a pace of 5 to 6%, generally speaking, over the last several years. We expect that trend to not only continue, but perhaps begin to accelerate. The cost of capital improvements in water and wastewater projects has been far exceeding the inflationary pressure on water and sewer capital projects far exceeds general inflation and has for years. While that is beginning to back off a little bit, what we're still seeing is 12 to 15% annual construction inflation on water and sewer projects. So the fact that many water and wastewater rate plans are driven primarily by capital improvement projects, We expect that to continue, and like I said, perhaps even accelerate. The AWWA, which is the American Water Works Association, expects that the trend of water and wastewater rates will essentially triple over the next 15 years, that the cost of providing service due to the cost of inflationary pressures, the cost of regulatory issues that come up, and the fact that we have the same roughly amount of water and more people to provide that water to always. The pressure of cost of water and wastewater services is far outpacing the general cost of inflation. Rate adjustments tend to be primarily due to reasons beyond the utility's direct control. You have control over your operating expenses, obviously, the number of personnel that you have, those kinds of things. But when it comes to the capital improvement projects, your wholesale contracts, those sorts of inputs, which tend to make up a majority of a utility's budget, there are things that are, generally speaking, at least in the short term, out of your control. Now, obviously, replacing and staying on a regular capital replacement program, those sorts of things can continue to lower your costs over time. There are things that you can do that have an effect. However, just recognize that, again, due to the nature of this business being primarily paying for projects and paying for wholesale services, there's not a lot you can do in the short term. 30 to 40% of utilities are currently charging rates that don't fully cover their cost of service. As John pointed out earlier, you've had essentially a subsidy from your general fund paying for some of the debt that is utility fund issued. That is not uncommon. Those kinds of things happen all the time. And so when we show you a rate comparison chart later in this presentation about what the same amount of service would cost in other cities, just recognize that, again, 30 to 40% of utilities are charging rates that don't fully cover their costs. Sometimes it's in those direct kind of transfers or offsets or subsidies. Oftentimes it's deferred maintenance that just does not get done, that should be getting done, but it doesn't due to the fiscal constraints of the community. Next slide. So the city of Kennedale has not adjusted water and wastewater rates since 2018. So we are now going on, getting pretty long in the tooth in those rates, obviously. Arlington provides your water supply. Generally speaking, they do get some water from Fort Worth as well. Your wastewater treatment also comes from Arlington. Your customer billing, water and wastewater operations come from Arlington as well due to a partnership agreement. The combination of several factors is resulting in a need for a new long-term rate plan. Generally speaking, the operating expenses will continue to increase, although again, that tends to be a minority of your overall expenses within the utility fund. Fort Worth charges are increasing, the Arlington charges are increasing, and your need to fund capital improvements through that last debt issuance that you had in 2023 that the utility fund now needs to start picking up the cost of. Next slide. Your current water rates, I won't go into a ton of detail on this, but essentially you've got what we call a base plus an inclined volume rate structure for your water service. Your typical citizens pay a 3/4 inch meter charge of $20 right now. You have a $7.50 discount for senior and disabled residents. Your commercial pays a little bit higher than that for the base charge. And then you've got several tiers of 0 to 5,000, 5 to 20, 20 to 50,000, and then over 50,000 gallons. Those tiers are priced like that in order to try and have some conservation. The wastewater rates, you can see the same idea, a base charge plus a volume charge. However, there is no incline block on the wastewater charge. It's a flat volume charge for all of the use. The residential charge comparison, you can see here that you're generally speaking in the middle of the pack. I mean, your current costs for a typical 10,000 gallon water service, which would pay, roughly speaking, about 5,000 gallon wastewater to your winter quarter averaging. And again, there are communities that are lower cost than that. There are communities that are higher cost than you. You're about the middle of the pack here, and you're a little bit under the sample average of the area. Next slide. We'll talk a little bit about your customers and volumes. Right now, you've got about 3,200 water customers, about almost 3,000 wastewater customers. That's normal to have a little bit fewer wastewater customers than water customers due to irrigation meters, as well as sometimes there are people that still have septic systems and those kinds of things. So a typical customer makeup from what we would see. I will point out that your residential makes up about 85% of your total accounts. And so unfortunately, when it comes to the increasing cost pressures that are on a system, there really is no way to cover those additional costs without impacting residential in some way, shape, or form in communities like this, which is the vast majority of work that we do, where you get the vast majority of your revenue from the residential side itself. Next slide. So the actual and forecast total water accounts, you can see here we're trending up at about 100 new accounts per year. That's going to vary year to year, obviously, but we show a trend on both the water and the wastewater, and we just like to divulge what that trend is to ensure that it's, generally speaking, realistic from y'all's eyes. When you look at the water consumption, again, residential makes up the lion's share of your water use. Your average residential user is using about 10,000 gallons a month. Total annual use is about 416 million gallons. On the actual and forecast billed water consumption, again, what we do in our model is we just simply escalate that up with the account growth. And so we're accounting for about 100 additional customers a year on both the water and the wastewater side. Next slide. As we move into cost of service, again, most of the personnel and operating expenses, we escalate at a rate of about 3 to 4% a year, just keeping up with inflation. We do take your entire budget and break it down line by line and have different escalators based on our experience and based on the input of your staff. Certain costs do increase faster than inflation. Generally speaking, medical benefits is one of those. Those kinds of things. Electricity costs often does as well. The biggest impacts on your rate plan are the Arlington water and wastewater charges that we'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a bit. Your operating and billing agreement with Arlington, and then also the debt issued back in 2023 that funds your 5-year CIP. If you look at your total cost of service, you can see it broken down here. On the blue is the water side, and the green is the wastewater side. And again, you can look here and see that your Arlington contracts and your wholesale contracts in general will make up about 60 to 80% of your total cost, about 60% on the water side, closer to 80% on your wastewater side. And so that is the cost driver, generally speaking, that pushes these. When we look at your forecast annual water sources, this is something that I know that you've had many conversations on, but right now between Fort Worth, Arlington, and your city wells makes up the total of the 460 or so million gallons. What we're envisioning based on our conversations with city staff is that will trend more towards purchasing from City of Arlington, away from City of Fort Worth, and offlining for the most part your city wells over the next several years. That has an impact on your overall costs as well. As those wells come offline and you're buying wholesale water, there's a higher cost to produce or a higher cost to purchase water. With that comes a much higher degree of reliability and usually water quality as well. And so as we move into the next slide, you'll see that even though we're only expecting relatively modest growth of about 100 accounts a year, when we forecast out your Arlington water purchase cost, because that proportion of what you're buying is increasing from Arlington, the cost that you will be paying to Arlington will roughly triple over the next 3 years, going from a little under $1 million up to $2.7 million. Again, that is a combination of increases in Arlington's rates to you, as well as the amount of water that you're intending to purchase from them. Wastewater treatment rate, we've identified I think it's a 4% trend that we expect the wastewater rates to continue to climb as well. All of these simply go into the cost side of the ledger that need to be made up in some way, shape, or form. We're recommending that be done through rates. Capital improvement plan for fiscal 24 through 28 is a total of $17.2 million. 84% of that is on your wastewater side. Most of that work is either underway or will be underway very soon. And the water projects there you see make up 16%. When we look at the debt service payments by year, I want to draw your attention to the fact that you'll be going from about $295,000 in debt service payments in your fiscal 24, jumping up to about a little over $1 million for fiscal 25. That $750,000 is the primary driver behind the rate plans that we have. That goes and it peaks in a couple of years at just under 1.3 million, but that first jump is the biggest, and that's the one that we're most is most on the radar, quite frankly, for the rate plan. As we look at the forecast Arlington operations expenses, you'll see there's a decrease in 2027. And as we understand it, the agreement that you have with Arlington, the amount that you'll be paying for the operations goes down as you continue to buy more water from them. And as you get to the point of where you're purchasing essentially all of your water from Arlington in 2027, while that has an increased cost for purchasing that water, it gives you the benefit of having a decreased operating cost for their operating and billing operations that they have with you. As we look at the total water and wastewater cost of service, you can see here we expect it to increase from $6.4 million in the current fiscal year up to about $9.5 million by 2029. We project out 10 years. We don't recommend rates that far out simply because too many things can happen, but we would expect that to increase to about $11.7 million or nearly double over the next 10 years. So moving into the rate recommendation. What we're looking at here is we're recommending to you a 5-year rate plan. Many of our client communities like to be able to look out to the future and have some assurance on not only what their revenue streams will be, but also for their customers, what their customers should expect to be paying over time. And so we are recommending a 5-year plan here as well. We initially came in when we talked initially in January, we had recommended an adjustment in March of this year. Obviously, that was not done as we were working through this additional issue with Arlington. And so now we're looking at essentially, kind of a makeup adjustment in October of 2024 to account for the recommended March adjustment in addition to the October adjustment that we also had online. The percentage annual adjustments would be for all customer classes, and by customer classes, I simply mean residential, commercial, industrial, those sorts of things. And the percentages that we've got would follow through to each of those different customer classes. If you go back one more slide. We are looking at restructuring the multifamily rate to implement a base charge by meter size and included the first 1,000 gallons that mirrors the residential rate. Pending Arlington's billing system verification that they're able to do it that way. We are recommending to continue the $7.50 reduction on the senior and disabled rate. The plan will fund the city's financial requirements, the debt service coverage, paying back the general fund, your percentage of operating capital, those kinds of things. And again, we recommend this across all of the rate classes. We're focusing primarily tonight on residential, but your staff has the full rate plan as it moves out. Next slide. So from a residential standpoint, what would that mean? We've got a couple of different pieces in here that I want to draw your attention to. Your current base charge, again, for your most common residential meter, the 3/4 inch meter, is $20. We'd recommend that for fiscal 25, that goes up to $25.60, I think it is, if my eyes are serving me right. It would go up $27.90 for FY 26. For FY 27, it would go up to $30.42 and then $32.24 for fiscal 28. The volume charge would increase by the same percentages each year as well. And so right now your first tier is at $275, they'd go up to $352, then $384, $418, and $443. As the additional tiers are priced higher, again from a conservation rate perspective, those would go up by the same percentages, but different dollar amounts based on the higher base. For the commercial and industrial, it's the same percentages that we have here, just starts off a higher base as well. A 3/4 inch meter for a commercial currently pays $26 base charge as opposed to the $20 residential base charge. The volume rates are the same between both customer classes, and so we recommend that continues as well. From the wastewater side, it's a little bit higher rate recommendations here, largely because of that interceptor line that John talked about earlier. Right now, your base charge is at $30. We would recommend that goes up to, let me see, $48.20, I believe it is. And then $49.68, $52.36, and then by fiscal 28, $54.77, I'm sorry. So that does increase the base charge fairly considerably in this first year. That is in large part due to the 2023 debt. and those capital projects that are associated with it, as well as the fact that while your operations have been essentially breaking even right now, as you include all of the additional cost, you just don't have a whole lot of room for your fund balance to continue to operate without rate increases and the revenue that comes from those in the fairly near term. Next slide. So from a bill impact standpoint, when you combine both the water and the wastewater charges on a typical bill of a 10,000 gallon, again, your average is just over 10,000 gallons, the bills would go up from just under $106 currently up to a little over $141. Recognize that that's a substantial increase all at one time. However, I will recall your attention to the fact that you haven't raised rates since 2018. And so we're 6 years into that rate plan now. And if you look at that over time, and I know that's little consolation to those writing the next check. However, if you look at that over time, that does break out to be about a 3.5–4% rate increase in each year since 2018. So next steps, the proposed rate plans that we have, and again, it's for all of your classes, not just for those that we talked about tonight, we believe are ready to be adopted and would go into effect for your next fiscal year. It would enable your fund to begin to pay back the general fund, as well as to pick up all of the debt service that is directly associated with those utility fund projects. And most importantly, will allow you to continue to serve the community with quality drinking water as well as quality wastewater services for the foreseeable future. Be happy to take any questions that you've got now.
Open the floor for questions. Just a couple on my end. So if we expect the water and wastewater rates across the USA to triple in the next 15 years, that's that's concerning for especially folks on fixed income.
It is, and communities across the country are trying to address that in a variety of ways. The essential problem, as I'm sure you can imagine, is that with these utility funds, they're a bit like a balloon. If you try to keep rates and costs low for one particular group, what that means is that everybody else needs to pay for it. And so you've got in place the senior disabled, $7.50 off. And your volume rates are a little bit off as well. And so there is a policy in place here to try to affect some of those at least. Again, recognizing that senior and disabled are not the only ones that are financially burdened by utility rates. But again, it's a conversation that's going on all over the country. At the end of the day, there just has to be the recognition that the costs are the costs. And if you keep rates low for one particular group, it has to be borne by somebody else. Unfortunately, in cases like this, again, where 85–90% of your revenues are coming from residential, and your commercial base, you don't have a huge manufacturer here that's using half of your water, or a large wholesale customer that you're providing water to and able to recover revenues from that. Most of your revenue stream comes from your residential. And so, again, there just unfortunately is not a good way to generate the revenue that's needed to support the system without having the impact on residences.
Okay. And so, I know fiscal year 25, the city's got to catch up in essence, but after that, and the, proposed rate increases or what have you, fiscal year 26, 27, and 28, would you say in your best estimation that's in line with other cities our size that are 80% residential?
Yes, absolutely. And again, when we look at getting over that initial hump, essentially, there's a couple of things that are working in your favor. One, that's behind you, right? And you're now fully paying and fully funding the operations of the utility as a whole. And because of the strategy to continually purchase more water from Arlington, that will end up decreasing your operational costs to some extent in 27 is when it's currently looked at. And so we're able to take advantage of both of those things essentially at the same time. I will say that one of the reasons that we recommend these either 3 or 5 year rate plans is to begin to get in that regular cadence of having rate increases so that you don't have a big jump in one year like we're looking at right now. But that is what you're faced with at the moment, is recognizing that your utility fund is not fully covering the cost. You're subsidizing it with your general fund. And to the extent that your desire is to reverse that, and we always recommend that you do, the only way to do that is through a fairly substantial increase early on.
All right, thank you, sir. Other questions?
So right now, we've issued a lot of debt to fix some of our infrastructure, especially on Basin B with sewer or wastewater. Are these, excuse me, are these numbers figured? Because I know every time we get rain, we get a lot of excess water seeping in. So is there any possibility that the wastewater rates could go down once we start getting this line replaced?
That's a great question, and particularly in your case where you're a wholesale customer of wastewater or of treated wastewater service. To the extent that you can mitigate your I&I, your infiltration into your wastewater system, there is an opportunity to actually shave some costs. A lot of communities, if they operate their own wastewater treatment plant, and they've got the plant there, it's a fixed cost investment, they've got the staff there, whether or not they shave off 1 million gallons from a storm event doesn't really make a difference on a cost basis. You're paying by the gallon, so it does. So all of that to simply say, to the extent that you've got some I&I issues, and every community does, particularly aging communities, there's absolutely an opportunity to take advantage of looking at strategically filling those gaps, quite literally in this case, and having a smaller impact on your overall. We haven't planned for that necessarily as part of this rate plan, simply because there will be further actions that this council needs to take in order to address that. And so we want to make sure that we're not having a rate plan that doesn't actually recover the costs should a council down the road not address those issues as they come up.
Other questions? Thank you,
Thank you.
sir. All right, at this time, any discussion on the council?
I think my only comment about this, and some of you who've known me for a while know that I'm kind of against capping our water system itself. For me, it has anything to do with this. This just kind of affirms my stance on it, but more on a state level, just the opportunity to even have wells, you can't have one anymore. They're not really selling anybody any new rights to do wells unless you're really out in the rural country. So when we come across that road in the future, I think we should have a serious discussion about if we should close those wells permanently, because once we permanently do that, we can never open it up. And at that point, we'll be at the mercy of Arlington. They can do whatever they want with rates and maintenance plans and things like that, even if it's in a short-term contract. So that's my only comment. This was a no-brainer for me. It should have been done every year since 2008. We do have capital improvements that we're doing that are absolutely necessary to the system and to our future growth. So I don't have a problem with this. This just supports my idea that we should have a good discussion about capping our wells in the future.
Thank you, Councilman Navarez. Noted. Any other discussion?
Well, to cover Jeff, a lot of it is we just don't have any control over it. It's something that the state is doing, and a lot of it is because of contaminations of the aquifer. So they want to do everybody to hard water and get them off soft water so we could at least protect some of our water. So a lot of it is it's like we're phasing out 2 wells this year, and then I'm assuming that we'll probably do Pluxee 1 and maybe another Trinity next year, and eventually by 27, we're going to be relying on Arlington water or Fort Worth water. So, I mean, this is all the state. It's not the city saying, no, we want to keep our wells. Once we shut them down and we're not pumping, we got to do something with them, and we got to cap them.
And I totally agree with you. This has been a topic I've been following since Fathom. And I've learned a lot about water, especially before it was a hot topic around here for elections. And from coming out of the 2014 drought season and just the panic that we had this year across the state about getting water, and what the state did in response quickly, by the way, within a couple of years, to get water in North Texas. I just see a bigger picture. I see them selecting certain water sellers to sell water. And that's just my point of view about it. We are technically a water seller, and the minute that we give that up, and I understand the wells are broke, for me, it's fix it before we get in trouble, so we can come compliant. Again, that's just a conversation we can have in the future. This is kind of separate, but I agree with you, and I understand why, what we're required to do. I'm looking for the next drought season. We have drought seasons every 24 years approximately. So what's going to happen in another 14 years from now? And that's my biggest concern.
Thank you, Councilman Navarez. And, also, just for the record, I would add that Arlington is asking us to make a commitment to get off of our well water. And Mr. City Manager, is Arlington asking us to cap those wells at this time, other than just to get off of well water?
No, the state is the one that's actually requiring the cap it.
Okay.
Arlington is not.
Okay. And Councilman Navarez noted, I think I would welcome that discussion at a future council meeting as well. Your point's well taken. Yes, sir. Other discussion items related to this?
So just to clarify, so it was in 2018 or 2019 that we started using the City of Arlington water, if I remember correctly? Later than that? About 2019. So, 19.
Signed a contract with them, and it connect us on the east side of town.
Okay. So the big increase this year is because we haven't had any type of increase over the last 4 or 5 years to our residents, right? 6 years now.
I think
Okay.
in 2016 or 2017, they tried to do an increase, but it was a massive increase.
Correct.
This right here is going to give a little bit of time for the citizens to actually budget it instead of the last one. I think the last time, normally on an average, I get about an $80 water bill. When they did it that one time, it was like $130.
Well, this
When
one's
it's just
what,
saying
35?
we had to increase it, yeah.
Yeah, but this one's $36 to $40 on the
Right.
same amount of, so it's almost as, like you said.
Right.
Okay, I'm just concerned over such a big jump,
Yeah, we're all
30,
concerned about it.
40% in the first year, so.
Yes, sir. Councilman Gary, that point well taken, but yes, mostly because we haven't had the rate increase. And, in meeting with other city officials at other cities, I mean, they generally, as the gentleman mentioned, increase their rates every year to kind of help offset some of that. So we are going to have some sticker shock fiscal year ~25.
I think if I remember right too, the rate increase happened and then they turned around and lowered the rate and not, that they just kind of lowered it down just to get past. And then nothing's been done since 2018. So, I mean, everything's went up, and we probably should have been planning this since 2018 instead of planning it now.
Yeah, a lot of that had to do with the Phantom disaster, in which us getting out of that was the best thing the city could ever do. It was really upside down. The water rates were fine. It was the sewer rates that were ridiculous. I think my minimum was $65 just to flush one toilet, basically, back in those days, which we have corrected. But that's also bad advice that we got as a city back then, and just incorrect internal policies. What we paid for today and the results is advice for the future to prevent any weird water issues that we've had in the last decade to never happen again. Now we have good guidelines on how to address this in the future. And when we do another study 5 years from now, we'll be in a better position now than we were 5 years ago.
And Mr. Mayor, one thing we discussed in January when we first saw this presentation was we spoke to the city manager about messaging this to the citizens with mailers proactively and probably continuously, because if we're projecting $300 water bills in 15 years, yes, that's a long ways away, but it'll be here before we know it. Just don't say it tomorrow, because that'll get everybody in here at the next council meeting, but certainly as time goes on, we just need to let them know this is the projection that's going to happen.
And this goes back to my original concern when we have another drought. I mean, North Texas has been very prepared. We've spent almost $1 billion in running new water just to DFW from other lake sources or other reservoirs. But are we really prepared for another drought season with the expansion and projected expansion in the next 14 years, just in DFW alone? We're projected to be the biggest metropolitan area in the country by 2030, and that's crazy and mind-boggling to me to provide all that water for one area. So that's my concern. If we can, it's like a backup plan to me. If we can have a safe and secure backup plan, we can never separate from Arlington once we cap. We're going to be with them forever, basically. And I have nothing against that. I'm concerned about what ifs in the future.
Thank you, Councilman Navarez. Any further discussion? I'll entertain a motion. Don't everybody jump all at once.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the proposed new water and wastewater rates as presented in 2024 wastewater and wastewater rate study and financial forecast.
Do we have a second?
Mr. Mayor, I second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? All right. All opposed? All right, the motion passes 3-2. Our next item is a discussion and update regarding business occupation licenses. Mr. City Manager, I'm going to turn that over to you or actually, Nathan, sorry, or
just to clarify, I didn't get promoted right there, so. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Good to be with you again. I wanted to give you an update. If you recall, wasn't long ago, we discussed business licensing and permitting. More specifically, the city ordinance, section 11-41 through 45. It's Article 3 of our Code of Ordinances. It refers to business permitting. Business licensing is kind of a semantic term. But essentially, it's permits required in order to, where our ordinance requires annual registration and the payment of a fee that's whatever's adopted on the fee schedule. So currently it's $25 that is on our fee schedule. And the purpose, after reviewing the ordinance and other sections of the UDC and other applicable areas, so the purpose essentially was just to simply identify existing businesses within the city, and it says here to ensure compliance with applicable codes, ordinances, and state laws. Identifying businesses that are registered in Kennedale, we can do that already. For example, check on the appraisal district, see who's got business property there. We can go to state websites as well to see who's registered a business in Kennedale whenever they pay their taxes. Also, our certificate of occupancy are the procedures that we have right now. They're set up and structured the same way. So when someone applies for a CO, they provide us the sales tax information, a couple other documents. We perform our inspection, which is the purpose of the CO for building safety. And so it's structured in the same way. Saying that is that business permitting seems to have become redundant for us. So not only are we issuing a CO for a new business that comes in town, but we'd have to go back and collect an extra $25 to issue the same permit, business permit that the CO authorizes them to operate. So in that sense, is what I'm saying, it becomes redundant. So under the current ordinance, attaining a business permit, again, does not subject businesses to annual inspection. I did review for that. It's only simply registration and the payment of a fee. We know that the fire department, they conduct annual inspections, and if they come across something, which they often do, or our police department comes across something, which they often do, they simply notify code enforcement, and then we can go ahead and address that with the landowner, business owner at that time, if it's warranted. So again, we reviewed the existing ordinance. We found that if the ordinance were to be amended or repealed, it wouldn't negatively impact any of our departments, city, other ordinances, any of our procedures. Should council, should you all consider to leave it in place, we will then work to identify what active businesses have yet to update their registration. I do want to advise council that this is going to be a time-consuming effort and may require a mass mail-out to local businesses advising them of the requirement. That essentially would be a function of our code compliance. Fortunately, the ordinance that we do have in place right now makes it unlawful to operate a business without the annual business permit, which means if they fail to comply, they would be subject to citation if it's not resolved. So in the past, I was able to find records of where the city or our department has mailed out notifications to those businesses saying your annual business permit has expired or near expiration. Come in and update that. I was able to find a comprehensive list. Spend some time though. So the most updated list I could find in the records there was 2015. It showed 272 active businesses in Kennedale. Since our permitting software that we have in place has been in place, I believe it's 2019. Some of those records go back to 17. It's probably historical data that's been imported. There really hasn't been a concerted effort to identify or have annual businesses actually update those registrations. And so it's something we can certainly look to do if that's council's direction. But again, we find that it's somewhat redundant in the sense that our CO application procedures take care of most of, if not all, the issues that come with our requirement for annual business permitting. So with that, I recommend that you consider, I don't know if repealing of Article 3 is the proper term, even though I said that in the staff report. It's probably the ordinance that's in place that established it, but that's just the section of the ordinance to where the business permitting requirement is listed. So we could look to provide something in the next meeting if that's council's direction. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. So just for the record, the staff does recommend repealing this pending, I know you're going to do some research and make sure that it does not, or bring back any potential impacts that we have not yet foreseen.
Correct. So the only caveat or the only connection that I can currently find is on our adopted fee schedule. The next fiscal year, later this fall, one of our goals of our department is to get that fee schedule actually updated. And so it's a simple fix, so we can just leave it off the fee schedule. It won't be listed there anymore if that's council's direction.
All right, thank you. We'll open the floor for discussion.
So Nathan, as far as 272 business, $25, about $6,500 a year is what, if we start enforcing this strictly, that's the best case scenario, $6,500 in income, correct, for the year?
That math sounds like it works in my head. And but that's an update. That's an old list. So we're talking a list that's like 10 years old.
Oh, the 272 businesses?
That's back from a list from 2015.
Oh, okay.
So that's not today's list.
Would you say it's more or less now?
I really couldn't say. I don't know what it was like here in 2015. I don't know if Town Center was around or they were building a couple buildings there, but I see a lot of vacant businesses, so it's off the Parkway.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Gonzalez, just for the record, is it still your estimation that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but keeping this on the books and the income that it would potentially generate would be more trouble than it's worth, or would, or maybe that's not the right terminology, but, having to put resources to take care of this, if you will, and that would take them off of something else. Is that still your estimation?
It would, and that's going back and looking at the past probably 5 years of adopted budgets on what the city actually brought in with business licensing, and it really wasn't much. Looking at our permit software, we were talking about a couple $100. So perhaps in 2015, if the city collected on every single business on that, you're talking maybe a couple grand on that. But today, to have a staff member pulled off of permitting or inspections or something like that to get a hold of that and go out there and identify and generate a notice. Unfortunately, the notice would say, it almost read like a notice of violation. We would probably reword it a little differently, but essentially that's what it is, right? your permit or your business permit is expired, or you haven't updated it in 4 or 5 years. So the question is, do I go back, collect 4 or 5 years worth of fees, or we just call it even, collect it for the last year? And looking back at how the department has operated the last couple of years, it didn't seem like that was on the forefront. So I couldn't really find a lot of inspection records. All the letters that were mailed out were very dated. So I kind of go back to the 2015, even prior to that at one point. So again, we run a lean, mean operation, but if that's the direction, we'll get it done.
Thank you, sir. And I know we had a pretty lengthy discussion several council meetings ago. Any other discussion points, questions?
So Nathan, clarify it in my case, since I was the only one that ever did the home business application. Are you going to require me to do the application still, or do I do this? Because I don't have a point of sale on service-based business.
I have yet to write a citation on it.
Okay. So what would I have to do as a business? Do I go back and still do the home business application every year?
That's a good question. I believe there were some others that did home-based business permitting. I can think of maybe 1 or 2, but we did. I guess make sure I understand your question. Is it, do you still continue your application?
Yeah. So my original complaint with you was, why am I the only one doing this? Basically, is what we found out that last meeting. But why should I do it annually is what it was. So for me as a home business who doesn't have a point of sale, I don't need a CO technically either. What do you want me to do as a business? Do you want me to still register, or?
I would advise you to kind of hang tight.
Okay, fair enough.
And
Keep me on your radar, Nathan.
yeah, I know where you live, but we do have, our UDC has a whole section on home-based businesses. So, I mean, if you operate a business, an e-commerce business, you're in your home. You don't have HVAC units stacked outside. You don't turn your front yard into a used car lot. You're not going to violate any of those UDC ordinances. So, again, I don't, unless it's requested, I don't see a reason to require it at this point, but other than being in compliance with the ordinance.
Any further discussion? Mr. City Manager, do you feel you've got enough direction from the council at this point to work with your staff and bring it back to the council for a vote in a future meeting?
I feel comfortable enough if you guys want to make a vote tonight.
Any discussion on that?
So I'll just make kind of the same comment that I made the last time we discussed this. I still feel like it should be on the books. I think if you're running a business, even if it's at your house, you're utilizing city resources, streets, et cetera, it's a nominal fee, but it is still a fee that can't help. Now, that being said, if it's a burden on your team that just creates more toil, it isn't worth, I think the expression was, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Okay, then we talk about that, or we look to see, can MyGov automate this for us? But to your point also, we don't have an accurate list of all the businesses in town. So unless we want to pay someone to go look through Google Maps and look at everyone who's registered their business in their house, that's always interesting when you go look and see, oh, so-and-so's running this out of their home. There's not going to be a good way of doing it.
Yeah, and to your point, Councilman, it is a little difficult. If someone is operating a business out of their home, I mean, as long as it's not violating a nuisance ordinance, something more power to them. I would think that, in our department, building inspections, city planning, and code compliance, we're more interested in the health and safety, building safety side of things. It's not to say that business licensing, there's not a role for it, but perhaps that's a role for the EDC as a member with the EDC, or perhaps the chamber to keep updated list. What we're talking about is keeping tabs or being able to be updated on business activity. It's not exactly a function of our department per se, whereas we're more, our purpose there is to make sure that things are built correctly and safely. So that's what I would say to that.
Would this include short-term rentals as well?
No, short-term rentals is a separate ordinance. It is in the same section, not in Article 3. It has its own standalone ordinance, so wouldn't affect short-term rentals at all.
Do you feel like you need additional time to uncover any potential side effects that may not be known at this time?
I don't. Since we last spoke, I did do some digging on that. I would think, I'm more than happy to, at the next council meeting, present the actual ordinance and work with city attorney's office to make sure we get that buttoned up, because right now I couldn't tell you which ordinance it was that put it in place. Our Muni code just simply lists a year that it was put in place. So I've had a difficult time trying to locate that, but I'm happy to come back now that we have that direction here, we can present an actual ordinance for you to consider, read, and then take action on.
So just to clarify, you would feel more comfortable with us having a vote, or you feel comfortable if we had a vote tonight to?
This discussion has provided me the direction that I needed to engage with the city attorney's office to locate that ordinance. We'll have that ordinance drafted, and we'll present that.
Okay.
So my understanding was tonight was a discussion.
Yes, sir.
Just an update on that, not anticipating any action, but action's always welcome.
City manager threw me a curveball there. And by the way, I have to compliment you, because I was in the office when you said, I'm going to have to jump a lot higher. So you did. You jumped. You got it done in very little time. So kudos to you for that. But is the council okay if we let our staff do what they need to do to present us with the information we need to place a vote?
I just want clarification. So which direction are you wanting? So we have one that says leave it. So I need to know what direction, in the sense, do we want to leave it? Do we want to update it? Do we want to get rid of it? What is your direction? I've heard two different directions, so I just want to clarify what that direction is.
Okay. As it is my understanding that we are anticipating repealing Article 3 of the Code of Ordinances, moving forward with that. I think Councilman Glover has some apprehension about doing so, but I would be interested to hear the thoughts of the rest of the council.
Well, it sounds to me like if we leave it in effect, the manpower / time it will take to enforce it will be a strain on that department. That's the only issue I see with repealing this. So it's pretty much, and if we're not going to enforce it, if we leave it there and we don't enforce it, then we're going to have, we did all this for nothing. So I would just ask that we keep that in mind there, that we need to make sure we enforce it if we leave it. That's it.
I think I know Councilman Navarro's opinions on it. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem?
I'm kind of on the bubble with it. I mean, I can understand with business occupation and stuff like that, it's different than our CO. But it's, like Mr. Gonzalez said, if it's not a nuisance, then he's not going to enforce it. So, I mean, I can go either way on this. So I'm not any help. I'm sorry.
Councilmember Kobeck?
It sounds like we haven't been enforcing this for several years. And to start doing it now seems to be prohibitive in terms of costs, workforce power, that sort of thing. I don't know that it's a bad thing to have on the books, but it just sounds like it would be very prohibitive to suddenly, after so much time, start enforcing this. With that said, I think that we need to give Mr. Gonzalez a month to work with the city attorney and put together what it would look like to repeal it, and then we can put it before a vote, as opposed to taking any action tonight.
Councilman Glover?
My last comment on this, if there's a way to get a list of all the businesses easily without adding more burden to your staff, and then we can automate that with MyGov, or once a year, we send out invoices, they send in their $25 checks. Year over year, that does add up. So if we can make it easy, that's how we leave it. And then at least that way, the EDC also has another list of the businesses in town that we can possibly leverage that for other stuff. If we just abandon it now, it's gone. So my 2 cents.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I just wanted to remind council and you, Nathan, too, that the original idea behind this was really it's about bureaucracy, red tape, right? How we can allow businesses to get easier. For me, it was just, it's redundant for me as a home business to come every year to do 2 businesses, by the way, eventually it became, where nobody else has to do that every year. Nobody else has to pay another fee for a CEO to open a business. They already paid it once. So that's why I originally asked the city to look into this. Is this one of the many things that we can do to just encourage businesses, especially home businesses? For me, it's a big benefit because I don't have to pay, rent or extra utilities, and I can give good price reduction for my clients. I don't have to, charge thousands of dollars. I can charge 1,000. And so that's why I have a home business, and that's just what I notice is, especially if I'm the only one. Why do we have these kind of procedures? Where is it coming from? And if this is where it's coming from, then I don't have a problem, removing this as a step in the right direction for making it easier to do business in Kennedale. I think this is a moot point. It doesn't help or hurt us in the end. But again, it could be just a step in the right direction. I just want to clarify to Nathan, and when he was digging into this, if this was just something that's just not effective, then we should not do it and do it a better way, or to not do it at all.
Anything else?
Mr. Gonzalez, do you think there's a better way to do it? Do you have a plan, or?
I think it'd be a great opportunity for the EDC or the chamber to take the lead on communicating and contacting our businesses.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion to table this until the next session. Do we need a motion?
I don't know that we would table it since it's not up for, since there's no motion, or it's not up for individual consideration. I think at this point, if we just direct the city manager to, do you feel that you have enough information to let Nathan work with the city attorney and bring it back to the council with the intent of putting it for individual consideration at the next meeting?
Correct. We'll have 2 options for you to be able to look at either way. That way you have enough information to know benefits.
Thank you, sir. And yes, let's take a 10-minute break. The time is 7:01. Let's be back at 7:11. Let's go ahead and start making our way back. All right, it's 7:13 PM. Let's go ahead and resume. Now, this brings us to item number 3, discussion and update on an analysis of Kennedale streets.
So Mayor, council members, hopefully you all had the opportunity to look over those updates that we provided earlier. So if there's any questions or you need clarification on any of those 2 items on this agenda here, I'll be glad to, or at least try to answer those. If you all remember, we discussed this in the last week session as well.
Do we have any discussion, questions?
Hi, Christian. Just for clarification, this is based on the analysis of I forget the name of the firm, that drove around and they scanned the road?
Yeah, IMS.
Okay. I guess one of the questions I did have is we have a lot of discussion going on separately in the budget around Peggy Lane. I don't see Peggy Lane in the very poor category. I think we can all agree it's a very poor road. So can you just speak to maybe why it's not on this list? Is there something about it that kept it off of the very poor category?
Peggy Lane didn't make the poor category, it's marginal. So right now we are focusing basically to try to catch up on the backlog. So right now we have at least 13% of the entire network, which we have is like 49 lane mile, center line lane miles, that's in poor condition.
Okay.
But Peggy Lane, we want to have that done because we have water and sewer issues on that.
So that request for funding for Peggy Lane is more driven not by the quality of the road, but by the water and the sewer infrastructure
Correct,
underneath the
because we
road.
have asbestos cement water line on that street.
Thank you. That explains more of that. Thank you.
Also with Peggy, we also have stormwater issues too. You hit about the 1300 block, there's no place for the water to go except into a residential. So it's on the lower side of it. So that's half of Peggy has a curb and the other half doesn't have any curbs at all. So that's one of the focuses. And this traffic study's not going to, or the street study's not going to show water flows, that we have potential that through the whole city with, our ditches and stuff like that.
Yeah, and then Peggy Lane also, the street is higher than the property. So everything flows down to the properties. So it kind of behooves us that if we're going to do anything on Peggy Lane, that we need to put storm drain in there.
Peggy Lane is surfaced with chip seal, is that correct?
Hot mix asphalt, correct.
Okay.
Chip seal is separated from asphalt, but it's an asphalt product.
Okay, so if we did do work on Peggy Lane, we would be replacing that with asphalt?
We could, or we could upgrade it to concrete, which would be the better choice, but to save money, we could go back with hot mix.
I know when we were speaking on July 9th with Precinct 2, they were talking about the surface of Peggy Lane, and they were fairly concerned about that. I know they also said that one option for Peggy Lane might be to use millings to fix that one as well as several other streets. And that would from what they suggested, reduce our costs significantly because that would provide the materials and we would then be responsible for the manpower, the signage, the flagging, the equipment.
Correct, if we do it as an ILA, and you're saying they recommend doing milling or using millings?
Well, Councilman Geary, was that what you understood?
I think for the cost saving measurement, because as we said last month, it was our last meeting was $3 million for Peggy Lane.
Correct.
That includes the infrastructure. Now that you're telling, responding to Mr. Glover about the water, the water lines, the storm water, stuff like that. I guess we weren't aware that there was that much of that involved in that for the cost. So just to keep the cost down, that's why they mentioned that.
If you forego all the utilities, just doing a street rehab, you're probably looking like, for the width and length of Peggy Lane, you probably look like 900,000.
I guess I should call a point of order myself for bringing up Peggy Lane when it wasn't actually what we're talking about here. I just had a question as to why it wasn't listed in the street, but we're talking about separate.
Right, it didn't make the poor and very poor category.
So one more question. You say here, we have sufficient capital bond funding to pay for this. What is the dollar amount that we're estimating?
Well, based on the report here, we are looking forward to do at least three asphalt street.
I'm sorry, just the dollar amount.
2.4.
So for everything that's listed, how many rows is this?
So we are looking at Eden, New Hope, and Sweeney Hyatt.
We've got some additional streets in the detail behind, in addition to those that are listed, in addition to Sweeney Hyatt, Eden, and New Hope. I think that may be where the confusion lies.
Correct.
Well, if you look at the overall analysis report, that we have a list of all the streets that's very poor and poor.
Correct. Yeah. So you have very poor and poor listed. So, but you're saying we're only going to take care of.
Correct, because we need to consider those streets that are very poor and marginal. If we're going to consider some of those, we have to consider doing utilities as well. Because we have the same situation in some of those very poor streets, that like what we have in Peggy Lane. Because we need to consider if we're going to do an overlay or full depth reclamation, you might as well go ahead and take care of the utilities at the same time. Otherwise, you'll be double dipping.
Let me jump in here just for a second. The analysis of our streets in the sense of we're currently, if you look at your list, once we jump down to our 24 bond, that's where the funding will be coming from if you choose to go this direction to improve the streets. The 24 bond is also in reference to the Little School Road project and the sublet realignment. That's where the funding we were looking at for the 2.6 million. In our current budget that we presented last week is indicating that we're looking at Sweeney Hyatt, Eden Road, and South New Hope Road. That's what was presented to you last week. So as we move forward, if you do not want to do those three streets that ultimately has been budgeted for the last 2 years, that's fine. But as of last week, those are the three streets that are budgeted. If you want to move forward with the 2.6 million and not allocate that money to the Little School Road project or the sublet realignment project, those two will be taken off. And if you want to utilize the 2.6 million for other projects, this is why this analysis is in the workshop or in here.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. I was just unclear on which streets we're targeting. So just to recap, South New Hope Road, Eden Road, and Sweeney Hyatt are the three that are in scope. And they would be part of the 2.4 million, but they would cost 2.4 million, or they're just part of the 2.4 million bond that includes the.
No, currently, so the Sweeney Hyatt, Eden Road, and South New Hope, those are currently in this 24-25 budget. So what I presented Monday, those three road projects are included. that money is actually coming from the 23 budget, or I'm sorry, 23 bond. So when we're talking about the 24, 25 bond, which has the public safety remodels, $3 million Parks and Rec, what's left is 2.6 million. So the idea of what we were talking about last week is that 2.6 million, do we want to move forward the Little School Road project of doing design? Also, as we move forward with the 21 bond that was issued from Tarrant County, do we want to include the sublet realignment project, which ultimately at this point is a $12 to $13 million project from Tarrant County? Obviously, the Little School Road is at 40 or 39 million. Obviously, we do not have 39 million to move forward with that project, but one of the things we discussed is completing the design of that road as we move forward with the idea of getting federal funding, state funding, or other resource to be able to provide for that project. But I don't want to get you confused of the list we're looking at versus the budget and what we're looking at for the bond, because they're three different projects or funding.
I have a question. On this list, I noticed that South New Hope Road is on here twice. It's two sections of it, and it looks like they're basically connected. So when we're talking about South New Hope, are we talking about both sections? Are we talking about just one section?
It'll be just one section, so it'll be going from the railroad track
To Hudson Village
South.
Creek.
to Hudson Village Creek to the city limits.
Okay, thank you.
We were able to do the North New Hope last budget. Now with the Peggy Lane, with the 3 million, the idea, if we're going to go in and redo the road, we need to do the infrastructure with it. Because it is, in a sense, we'll be taking the road up to correct it, then we still have water and sewer that needs to be taken care of. That ultimately, that's the reason why it's a $3 million project. If you want us to go in and just overlay Peggy, that is a Band-Aid. And I don't recommend a Band-Aid at this point. If we want to go in, we need to go in and get it done right the first time.
The one thing about Peggy too is we've already engineered it. We engineered it 5 years ago, along with Linda Road too. But my question is this list that we have, is this the ranking from the worst to, I know there's other streets and stuff like that, but I look at it as where's Century at? It's a dirt road. Where's Mineral Street? It's basically a driveway. And what about Danny Lane? I mean,
It's all on that big, long spreadsheet that we send out.
Right, I understand that, but I mean, if you go down to the backside of Danny Lane, the road is completely falling apart. Century is a dirt road. I mean, so, is that going to handle the weight of the fire truck if there's a fire on that street? I don't know.
Well, I think if I remember correctly on that analysis that I provided, those streets that you mentioned, they were unclassified.
Okay. I mean, we also look at Kevin Miller too, that, has drainage problems. So I know we can't fix everything, but I know.
Well, we got to start and stop somewhere.
Right. And then I just don't understand how Peggy can be 3 million. I mean, isn't it smaller than Colette Sublette? By square footage? I mean, y'all have seen the engineer designs on it, so.
It's not much smaller in length,
Okay,
but, we have, if you consider water, sewer, storm drain, and sidewalk, the estimate right now that we have to date is like $3 million.
okay, because
I mean, when it goes for advertising and we get the bids back, the prices might be high, it might be low, but this is the engineer.
but when the council voted on Colette Sublette, it was 3.2 million, but we got it at 2.4 million.
Correct.
So there's still a chance that we can get it done cheaper.
It could be, based on the market, it could be.
Okay,
But to date, the OPCC, we have $3 million.
How many of these unclassified roads do we have? Just rough estimate.
On the top of my head, I would say we have like about 10.
So I agree, we have to start somewhere, and I have no objections to the roads you picked on the list. One question, and during the street study, during the presentation, the roads that were moderate, the ones that are getting close, or maybe they're poor, just on the edge of moderate to poor, they said, well, look, if you can just do the maintenance on the road, not let it get into complete disrepair, you'll save yourself or be able to delay the big rebuild later on. Is that coming up in a separate agenda item, or are you already baking that into your operational budget for next year?
I would like to see that happening, because now I keep asking for money for street maintenance. But, and this street that we have here on this list, this is just asphalt street. We haven't considered concrete street. And we have a lot of concrete streets that's falling apart.
Yes.
But if you look at budget-wise, your asphalt might cost you like $120 a square yard. For your concrete, you're looking like $200 a square yard.
So no,
So yes,
yes or no? No, you don't have anything in the budget planned right now to?
correct.
Okay.
But, you're right. We need to have money to do preventative maintenance, that you just do a mill and overlay and be done for it for another 3-4 years.
Okay.
But my plan would be, instead of just doing that, is that we budget for utilities as well, because we have a lot of substandard utilities in the city. So I don't want to see we spend $500,000 to do an overlay based on the limit of your street, and we have poor water and sewer.
When you were talking about the cost of concrete, is there any way that we can take these concrete streets and just do an asphalt overlay?
You could, but it's going to cost you just as much, because you have to do base repair.
Right, but to me, base repair would be find the area that is sinking, dig it out, put some road base in there with concrete, and then lay the asphalt on top of it. So if we come in and put 2 inches of asphalt on top of it, if it starts to settle or break, then we can just asphalt it, because obviously we don't have guys that can do concrete. We're going to have to contract that. So in the long run, it would be cheaper if we start looking at Reeves, Mistletoe, Hillside, Hilltop, all the other streets that need road repair that basically they're 30 years old.
Right.
So, and the standards have changed from concrete 30 years ago to now. So if we start coming in and just start asphalting these concrete, we'll still have the curbs and everything. Everything will be 2 inch higher, and we'll be able to fix a pothole if it happens, or come in and do, what is that, a scurry skid, or I don't remember what it's called. Something, you just come and do an overlay, a quick overlay over the top of it, yeah.
Yeah, do a mill and overlay. But yeah, we could do those, and that would be, to some extent, it'd be fine, but we'll still have to remove all those failing panels and put back base repair, at least 2 inches of asphalt or cement-treated base. So your cost is still going to be up there, but it wouldn't be as much as redoing a whole reconstruction with concrete street.
Right, and that's what I'm looking at, because if you look at Hilltop, Reeves, especially over there by the fire station, you've got that heavy equipment constantly rolling, and that's basically what's tearing up those streets. And plus, the rebar sticking up, and instead of half-inch rebar, it's 3/8 rebar. So, I know the standards have changed, but my deal is, I hate to bring up another city, but Debbie Lane in Mansfield, if you south of 287 going to Matlock, that I called it the clunk clunk road. Every time I drove down it was clunk 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 clunk. But they started coming in and putting asphalt on it, so I was thinking, well, maybe that's something we need to start doing.
Yeah, and like what we have in our city here, our curb is just sitting on the concrete on the street. It's not monolithic, that's all built in one. So you have a curb here and your street here, but they're not attached. So some of the areas that we have failing curb, we'll have to replace all of those. So that's going to be an additional cost. But you're right. We could go and do an asphalt overlay, at least put 1.5 or 2 inches on the concrete.
I mean, I think that would be the cheapest way to go to actually get more streets done than trying to spend 200 a square foot, trying to put concrete in. But that's my opinion about it.
Yeah, I mean, but I guess, I don't know, it's going to be what council wants and what your community and citizenry would rather have, concrete or asphalt. I'd rather have asphalt because, I don't have that noise pollution when I ride it on concrete. And like you said, the cluck, 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 cluck at every joint, you don't have that with asphalt street. But it's something for you all to consider.
Christian, with maintenance, how long do the roads last on average, asphalt versus?
Typically, a brand-new asphalt street, engineering-wise, would give you 20 years. On average, if you get like 13 years, you're lucky.
And versus concrete?
Concrete, engineering-wise, 50 years. If you get 30 years, you're good.
So it's almost double to almost double the lifespan?
But,
Or actually go past the lifespan?
but the cost is twice.
Yeah.
So,
But so maintenance over, if we got concrete, it would cost us more on the front end, but less towards the back end,
correct.
where
It'd
asphalt,
give you a longer lifespan.
and it gives a long, and then asphalt would be less upfront, but more over time because of patching and filling and things like that.
But, you're saving in the long run with asphalt.
And have you ever heard of a road made completely of millings? Recycled, I haven't heard either.
Millings will never stay because milling don't have no emulsion in it. You use milling to use a temporary road. If you want to go and be building a house in there and it's full of mud, you use milling, you just put it down like concrete, gravel.
Okay, that was my understanding too. Thank
So
you.
like, but the county told you millings, I think they meant something else, but milling is very loose.
Well, millings is also used to fill patchwork, correct? You can
No.
use millings for patchwork? They don't, not asphalt?
Because if you put millings there, you drive on it, it's gonna be gone, it's gonna
And
be,
those are the holes that come back with.
right,
Yeah,
because
okay.
it's not
That's what I thought.
not cemented together, it's just loose.
I guess I'll talk so nobody else will. No, I think one thing I would like to see is to actually come in and I know in the past they did a ranking, so I know this is not ranked by road, by road, by road, by road, but I mean, I feel that we need to start from the worst and, start hitting these ones that are very, very poor condition. But when you look at the concrete, they're just poor. And I look at it different.
Well, if you look at that and you really analyze that, there is a couple of segments with the concrete street that's rated raw. Poor, because if they look at the overall picture, like your New Hope Road, Little School Road, their brand new street, Bowman Springs, they're gonna be brand new streets. So your relationship of poor concrete versus excellent concrete is narrow because we have more lane miles of good concrete versus lane miles of poor concrete.
Yeah, but I also look at this list too, and I don't know if you've ever drove through Shady Creek, Old Shady Creek. There's Shady Creek East and Shady Creek. That's the same condition as Hillside, Paula, and Arthur, and everything else on that side. So, they're just completely settling and falling apart. So, but they're not on the list. To me, that whole area that was built in 1986, the Hillside Addition, Shady Creek, other than Creekside, I think that one's good. Oak Ridge, Peachtree, and Woodland Court. That area is just, the streets are just deteriorating, as we speak now. So, but I don't see them on the list like Oak Ridge, Shady Creek. There's a lot of streets that are not on this list that I would see poor and rough condition, but maybe it's farther down, but I know
Well,
it's
it
there.
probably is, but you need to consider when they're doing this analysis to get what we call the PQI or the PCI, the Pavement Quality Index or the Pavement Condition Index. They run the analysis and they're going to look at your riding comfort index, the RCI, and the SDI. They use those two things and they run their algorithm and they come up with the PQI or the PCI, and that's how you get the ranking of the street. So when they run those stuff on the street that you're considering, they might put those two criteria together, and when they run the analysis, it gives them as marginal. Even though you're seeing it as poor, the analysis would tell you it's marginal based on those two criteria.
Mr. Manager, you were mentioning the bonds earlier, and I think I heard 3 different bonds in there, is that right? My question is this a this or that decision tonight? As in, if we approve this, we're not going to be able to fund some of the other work that we discussed, whether it be the sublette realignment, Little Road planning, and I think there's a third one in there.
Right, I believe we had a council member ask for this, so I put it on so we can have a discussion over the road projects as a whole, being very poor. So that ultimately, that was what the decision was, is having it on the agenda tonight so we can talk about it in open session. Ultimately, the 24 bond, which is the 2.6, which is the next agenda item, that's where I truly need discussion on which way do we want to go. So that's a part of the overall 14 million. So 2.6 million of it is the idea of what do we do with the 2.6. So last week we had that discussion, and it was asked that we move on, and so that's the reason why it's tonight. So with what's left of that 14 million is 2.6. I need to know, do we want to move forward the Little School Road project of getting design completed with Freeze and Nichols? Do we want to move forward with a sublet realignment, which is a deadline that we need to tell Tarrant County if we want to move forward by September of 2024? That's the criteria, what we're looking at
Or this, so is it?
tonight.
So for staying in line with the agenda, those are going to be coming up, items 5 and 6, by the way.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm still unclear on the funding part. Are we saying that this work that Christian's presenting now would be funded potentially the 2.6, from the 2.6 of the 24 budget? Or it's going to be or that 2.6 will go to the next agenda items?
Yeah, and I'm sorry for the confusion on it, because it really is. And I think I just got it out of line on the agenda. Ms. Kobeck, I believe, is one of them that didn't get the email I sent out three weeks ago. So we had a discussion on it, and I resent that out for your review. The idea is for the streets that's identified as very poor, then we had the discussion about Peggy Lane. So with that, if we have any funding as we go forward in the 24-25 budget, if there's a street that you want to identify, we would like to have this street completed. That gives me some guidance as we go through the budget. If we have funding, I can put that road in there. The idea is when we had the discussion last week, Peggy was a topic with it. Currently, that's a $3 million project, give or take. I'm not prepared to be able to budget for that road if we do a complete rebuild. The 2.6 is where we started talking about, can we do Peggy? That's the part we need to have a discussion of what we want to complete with the 2.6. But if we want to look at this list tonight, and we can revisit it again, it's not a true priority tonight by any means. I would like to have an idea or a list of, I want these streets completed. That's beneficial as we move forward with a 3 and 5 year plan. If I know I have 5 streets in next year's budget, I know I need 3 million or 5 million. I can start planning for it. And that's the reason why we had the analysis done. The reason why Monday I presented New Hope Road, Sweeney Heights, and Eden is those 3 roads were asked 1.5 years, 2 years ago. With the funding issue that we've had with other entities is what prevented me from having those streets already completed. Unfortunately, now that funding, I'm using bond money for this budget to get those roads completed, since council wanted that completed 2 years ago. But I don't have funding for the current list that we have on here other than those 3. But as we move forward and I get these 3 done, you'll see in next year's budget some of these roads being completed.
So you have funding for Sweeney Hyatt, New Hope, and Eden
That's correct.
that is independent of the 2.6.
That's correct.
All right, so it does appear that there are some questions on the streets. When was this analysis done
The spring of this, I think, is late March, early April
of 24?
this year.
Okay. So could we, Mr. City Manager, I know you sent out an email asking for a wish list. I mean, I think maybe, could you resend that or? Well, I think several council members may not have received it. I know that there's been some issues with email addresses. Could we maybe resend that? Can we revisit this discussion at a later meeting
Absolutely.
and
Yes.
move on?
Absolutely.
But, yeah,
ahead.
one more quick question. I would like to see maybe Christian or something like that come in and do them, rank them. I know it'd be kind of hard to do, but I mean, like I said, in the past, we had rankings of the street from the worst to the best. We know that, New Hope, Sublet, it's getting there on the top of the hill right there at Vera. It's a clunk road too.
Well,
But yeah, I would,
that's the intent of this. So obviously, we have a lot of streets that's very poor.
right.
If you can give me the direction tonight or in the future of what roads you're indicating I want.
Here's the direction. Let's start fixing roads.
Well,
And-
and if
and
that's
I
your
added-
direction, I will start. But there's been so much discussion on Peggy, New Hope, Sweeney Hyatt. It's like pick a street. But if there's particular ones you want to completed, other than Eden,
At the end of Peggy, it's turning into a Cinco. So,
and give me the direction to go get Peggy completed, and I will get it completed.
And you'll notice I haven't mentioned Valley Lane.
Indeed. Why don't we continue this discussion at a later meeting, and that way we can maybe,
I've sent an email asking for individual council members' direction for that list.
And Councilmember Michael, just to clarify something for you why Sweeney Hyatt was added. Sweeney Hyatt, we just had utility completed in Sweeney Hyatt by the city of Arlington. So we know we don't have to do utilities. And Sweeney Hyatt from, I guess, Falcon Nest to Joplin is in bad shape. And that, the utility been completed. The section from Mansfield Cardinal to Falconwood, Falcon Nest, it's getting there. So it behooves us to make it as one project, and we're gonna separate it by a mill and overlay and a full depth reclamation, so we're gonna save costs, and we're gonna have Sweeney Hyatt completed.
well, and I understand Sweeney Hyatt because I drive it daily and the mayor drives it daily too. A lot of it is when we hire contractors and they don't follow the compaction of a street, then we wouldn't have the problem we had on Sweeney Hyatt out there close to Arlington. So, my whole deal is as long as we make sure these people are doing what needs to be done, then we shouldn't have problems.
So this
Because you
conversation,
shouldn't.
we kind of got all over the place here, and I started that by bringing up Debbie Lane. So just to recap, we could vote on this tonight, though, because you have the money today to do these 3 roads. They present us a list of the very poor roads. 3 have been identified. They said they can fix it. Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to vote on this. Just get it done.
It's in the budget, so you'll approve it in August.
So we're not voting tonight? Just a discussion?
We don't need it. All we need, I just need a discussion on the 24 bond.
so this is kind of a redundant discussion. We're going to discuss the 24 bond in items 5 and 6. And, this is a redundant item. And so we have the funding to fix Sweeney Hyatt, New Hope Road, Eden Road currently. And I think that, Mr. City Manager, this council would give you direction to fix roads. And I think this list is a good start. And I think maybe we can have some additional input because it seems, I think from all the council, each council member has, you know, some roads that maybe did not make the list that we might like to see make that list. And can we gather some input? And I like the Mayor Pro Tem's item. I don't want to overburden Christian, but it would be nice to see a ranking of streets. And I would say that this discussion is certainly fluid, and I think that our roads are a conversation that's probably going to continue to come up in subsequent meetings.
And just to interject, you know, I could go out there and I could make some recommendation by visually looking at it or driving it, but it wouldn't be based on scientifically proven, based on what IMS did. Those are scientifically driven and proven.
Yeah, but this what we got in our packet, when I looked at it, there's other abbreviations. You know, this is just a basic breakdown. I mean, the thing is that long. So you have to go back and forth, and then when you have to go to a different page to find the abbreviations, and then you got to come back to that road. It's really a pain. So I would love to see you rank the roads, so I don't have to go through all that mess, and I can just look at it and say, Christian thinks these roads are terrible, let's fix them.
It's analyzed by segment. So your street limit might be from A to Z, then it's analyzed by segment, like from A to B, B to C, C to D, and based on your ranking, it was poor, marginal, it's going to be listed on your spreadsheet differently. I rearrange your spreadsheet just to show the very poor and your poor.
And I understand that, but there's more to it than what we got. So,
And
good, let's move on.
along with that ranking, it would be nice to know what the criteria were. Just have it listed out, what the criteria were to get those rankings.
Did y'all receive the survey from the company? Sorry, what was the name of the company again?
I send it out, yes.
And the new council members got that also?
Yes.
Okay.
And, you know, I don't know if you all would understand it, but if you go and you open all those icons, you could see what it's saying. And we have a cheat sheet that tells you what those abbreviation is, like the SDI, the RDI, the PCI. You could see that. If you understand what they are, then you're going to know the ranking of the streets.
And then one thing we did talk about too, when we had that presentation, was possibly opening up to the citizens as a survey, say, hey, here's 5 streets, which one do you want us to go at? Like after we identify our 3 or whatever, if there's money left over, here's 5 streets, which ones vote? Just vote. Of these 5 horrible streets, which ones do you want us to go after first? That way they have some input.
Love the idea.
Well, we could do that, but just bear in mind, if we want to do that, we need to consider utility as well. It's going to be a 3 million like Peggy Lane if you do another street.
Mr. City Manager, you have a mandate from this council to fix the streets, in the city.
Yes, sir.
Do you feel that you have enough direction from this body?
Absolutely.
Just keep doing what you've been doing. I mean, you've been fixing streets, so.
And certainly, I take Councilman Glover's comment as well. You know, it would be nice to get some citizen input. You know, and maybe could we also explore some ways on the feasibility of how best to do that? All right. So let's move on to item number 4, an update and discussion on the 2023 bond issue and progress of the Basin B sewer line, ground storage tank generators, and street infrastructure. Mr. Christian, I think you're still up.
So just for an update on the Interceptor project, at this date, we are 30% on design. So anticipating 30% from today till end of construction, we are looking like 2028. So that's where we are at right now at 30%.
And this is Basin B?
Yes,
So
Basin B is part of the Interceptor project.
Okay, so we're roughly 50% done, is
30%.
30% done?
Design.
30% done with the design, just for the record, okay. All right, and so how, in your estimation, how long will it take for the design to be complete?
Based on the rate that they're going, I'm looking at the end of the year, early next year for design to be completed. So basically from after design, we are looking like 2.5, 3 years for construction. So I'm estimating by 2028.
All right. And so what about the ground storage tank generators?
So
Where do we
ground
stand?
storage tank, that has already started. We give a letter of intent to the vendor. They already started the engineering, the type of the manufacturing, and the manufacturing plant in Illinois or somewhere out there. So that's in work. Once we really start the demo and stuff and we start getting it, we anticipate 35 weeks, call it what, 9 months for the tank to be operational. So I'm looking like early summer next year. That's where we at with the ground storage tank.
All right, and what about the generators?
So your generator, if we want to talk about generator, that's part of the EPP, the Emergency Preparation Plan, or the SB3, the Senate Bill 3, that was come up back in 2018 as part of the America's Infrastructure Water stuff. Based on our submittal to the TCEQ and recommendation from our consultant, we anticipate that we would need 3 generators for our city. First, we want to start at least with 1 that we think we could get by with at the new storage tank that we're going to have at Corotas, where we're going to have the interconnect from Arlington. And when that's going to take place is early 2027, because we have up to 2027 to start getting our generators in line. And that's coming from our permit, not our permit, our application to the TCEQ that they accepted.
We're looking just for 1 generator, which will be at the new storage tank. So the 750,000 gallon tank, once it's in place and we're getting water from Arlington, the next step will be putting a generator there to cover the Senate Bill 3 requirements.
So the generator is going to be used to run the booster pumps and the well, basically. So everything else left Linda Road is elevated storage, standpipe, basically a type of elevated storage. I know, and I don't know if I'm going to be off topic or not, but I know with the bond coming up and the remodel with the fire department and the police department, are they going to be getting new generators because the building's getting bigger?
They will, that generator. they
So
have
can
is
we not take that generator?
big enough.
It's not big enough to run a well and a booster pump, or 2 booster pumps
No,
for an emergency
correct,
for 24 hours.
correct.
Dadgum.
The idea is we haven't necessarily got the full scope of it yet. We may also need to put a generator at the elevated tank. It's the after 24 hours, we have to provide water, so. Yeah.
At this time, are there any hindrances to the continuance and ultimate completion of the Basin B sewer line? Everything's going smoothly?
Well, like I said, once design is completed, we're going to advertise and start construction.
Okay. And the same with the storage tank and generators, everything is going smoothly?
Ahead of
Everything's
schedule.
copacetic.
Ahead of schedule?
That's correct.
All right. It's always nice to hear. I did a double take, because usually I rarely hear of anything going ahead of schedule in any facet of life, so kudos. Any other discussion, questions?
One more question about Basin B, and I can't remember, and I'm sorry. Basin B is actually going to extend underneath I-20 where our metering station is, correct? So and we're predicting this project will be done by 2028.
Correct.
So I know Southeast Connector is going on right now, so does that need to be a priority to where they start on that end first, or they have to start?
From my
On the south
understanding, they
end,
are
working-
starting at 20 and coming,
Okay, yeah, because you
No, we're
always,
starting down a third going up because the intercept, I mean, the Southeast Connector project is a 4-year project. It's been a year now, so they're going to be
well, it's a
just a
5-year
part to where
project,
we
it's
at.
already been a year. Start where our meter is and work their way back, because that way they're not going to have the sewer going uphill.
my understanding at 20, I don't think we're going to actually be under 20. It's going to be right at it.
Yeah,
I
it's
know
gonna-
that it is flat there,
You
but
know,
my
we ha-
understanding, we're not going under 20.
So what is that feeder right now? I mean, is it a 10-inch, 12-inch? Because I know we're going bigger.
Right, we're going to, our line that's finishing up, they're going to be 24.
Right, we're going to go 24, and then what do we have underneath 20 right now? A 12-inch?
Yes.
So here we go, bottlenecking it again.
No, I think it's a 36 inch.
No, that's Fort Worth.
Oh, okay.
And then, like I said, we haven't seen the final plan. We haven't decided if we're going to go through the direction of Arlington or through Fort Worth. That decision hasn't been made. I think we're still working with Freezer Nichols. They're working with us through the city of Fort Worth to get a good deal.
So if there's a potential bottleneck, can we address that now so we're not in the same spot 5 years down the road with the bottle? I mean,
An 18.
Yes.
Okay, I just found it. It's an 18-inch that goes underneath 20. So we're doing, what are we going to be doing? Are we going to be doing 18?
I believe so.
We have, right now on that interceptor project, we have lines that are 6, 8, 12. We're upsizing everything to a 15, a 18, and a 24.
So we're going to go 24 to an 18, because that's what's underneath 20.
That's what our consultant is going to be looking at.
Okay.
I'll get back with you.
So if that's what they have on 20 out there, and we're going to be tying into that, that's not,
My understanding, we're not going under 20.
Okay,
Let
I'm
me
just saying, we have an 18-inch right there underneath 20. If we're not going underneath 20, then we're going 24 to an 18. I mean, I'm looking at it right here,
Okay.
so.
so Mr. City Manager, you'll get further clarification on that for the council.
Absolutely.
Do we have any other discussion items, questions?
Also, just to clarify as well, since we're on that topic of number 4, that's the 23 bond, where that's what's going to be paying for Swinney Height, South New Hope, and Eden Road. That's the other part of that street infrastructure. Just to kind of let you know where the money's coming from.
All right, very good, very good. So now, we're moving to item 5 for an update and discussion on the 2024 bond issuance for the remodeling of public safety buildings, parks, and recreation facilities, and water sewer streets and/or utility infrastructure projects. And now, this council can discuss the
2.6 million. So I think we're all good on the remodels and the parks fund. So we have 2.6 million. Out of the 2.6 million, we were looking at the Little School Road project, which is a $39 million project. We know we cannot afford that at this point. However, I've asked that we move forward with the project with, to complete the design of the Little School Road, including the bridge as we go over the railroad. We do have possibilities of getting further funding through federal, state, and through COG. However, I'm not going to have that number to you this year, and most likely not even next year. But it gives us an opportunity to showcase what we're trying to complete. The second part, as we were brought to our attention earlier this year in January, was the 2021 bond as well that Tarrant County passed for the sublet realignment. That's the road next to the Burger Box, the design that Shield showed you guys last week. What I need at this point, there was a lot of discussion last week of Peggy Lane and other road projects and where we were funding it. So for now, the 2.6 million, which direction are you guys wanting to go? Do you want to go with a sublet realignment, the Little School Road project for both designs, for both of those roads? Or are you wanting to complete other road projects that is in the pipeline? With the sublet realignment, we need to be able to tell Tarrant County by September if we're going to move forward with that project.
So,
Bear in mind also that 4.8 that typically we're going to be getting from the county, we could start using that money as of after September. We could start using that as, start paying for design and some construction.
so just to clarify, so with the $2.6 million, we're looking at, is it accurate to suggest that the Little School Road design would be roughly $1 million?
Correct.
So that would be 1 million of that, and then obviously the current estimated cost would be 40 million. So we would, in essence, be, if we move forward, we would be paying for the design of Little School Road, and then there is some funding available currently, but we still would need assistance to complete the project. We need funding from some other source to complete the project.
Correct.
And additionally, with the sublet road expansion or realignment, that would also be roughly 1 million in design.
I believe this says a little less,
A little less, I think that's what I heard as well.
but yeah, it's roughly that.
Also, that would be the design, and, again, the county has pledged X amount, but we would still need assistance to finish off the project. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
And then obviously, there are other infrastructure roads that we have needing our attention as well, as we so discussed several times over. So let's open it up for discussion.
Also, just let me add this real quick. With the bond, the matching funds from Tarrant County, they do not go to other projects. It's just those two projects. So right now, on the Little School Road project, we roughly have 6 million that's been obligated to the city for that road project by Tarrant County. It's roughly the same amount of money for the sublet realignment. So sublet realignment is a $13 million project, and they're pledging roughly a little over 5.
4.8.
We decide not to move forward with either one of those projects, that funding is not coming.
I think they're coming out of different pools, aren't they? They're not-
It's the same bond, but two
yes.
different projects.
Okay, my question is, if I remember right, at the last council meeting, we discussed that the sublet, because it got tabled, so we discussed that the sublet deal would actually, the engineering would actually come from that bond for the county. That's not a 50/50, right?
They'll pay up to the 5 million.
Okay, so they would actually design the road for us, and we're not losing anything. On the Little Road, now, we know that's a 50/50 project. So if it's $1 million, we'll pay 500,000 to get the engineering done.
That's correct.
But we paid up front, then they reimburse us.
That's correct.
Okay, and I understand that, with the Little Road, you can't sell a dream. I mean, you gotta have something to show COG and everybody else is like, this is what we want to build. Okay, I'm good.
Other discussion?
So on the 50/50, we would get our half of the design fee. When we would get that? When the project starts?
Generally, once just say the design is completed, we can actually be reimbursed on a monthly basis. So we can submit invoices and get reimbursement as we go forward. But the upfront costs will be with us, then we'll be reimbursed as we go.
How long that'll be amortized over? 12 months, 24 months, 24 years?
It could be.
Okay.
Once we start submitting the invoices, it doesn't take long for it to come back.
So I know that there is a notice of funding opportunity for the Railroad Crossing Elimination Program, and it's several $1 million, and applications are due by, I think, somewhere in September. Because, and I'm not familiar with how this works, but if we were to apply for some of those funds, would one of the things we would be required to have be the design?
I really can't talk to see, I don't know what the requirements are.
Okay.
So that,
But generally, if it's applying for something like that, they want to see that we've got,
they want to know what we're doing.
okay, thank you.
That's correct.
So just to recap again, we have 2.6 million. There's $1 million for the design of Little Road, 50% gets reimbursed back, so call it $500,000. Sublette realignment is 100% reimbursement for the design. Still correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Still coming out of the 5 million, but yes.
And then going back to our favorite street in town, apparently Peggy Lane, was that also the number 3 item on that list of 1, 2, 3, or is that separate? Separate. Perfect, okay. So we're just looking at 2 different decisions, Little or Sublette?
Sublette and Little School Road.
Well, and you also have the opportunity to allocate some of that $2.6 million to a street that we could probably fix more immediately. Yeah.
Or put that into preventive maintenance funds and go tackle the moderate streets.
That's
so at least
correct. Absolutely.
Correct.
Fall into disrepair. Okay.
So you could do both, the design for both Little School Road and the Sublette expansion. You could do one or the other, do neither. And it's just, how do we allocate that $2.6 million?
So roughly, you'll have just roughly 600,000 to allocate for other infrastructure. As the bond is, how the bond reads currently, infrastructure is a very broad concept. So even if you wanted to do sewer, water, stormwater, streets, it's open. So it doesn't have to necessarily be just a street. If there's other infrastructure we're looking at, we can do that as well.
Christian, I have a question. So thinking in terms of $1 million to do the design for each of those 2 and having 600,000 left over, where would you recommend that gets spent and how?
Today, I would recommend that we do Clover Lane, because right now we're doing that safe route to school, and we put in brand-new sidewalk, and the street is, right now, it's marginal. I would go and do that street. We don't have to do utilities. Utilities are clear.
And would that take the entire 600,000?
I haven't put pen to paper yet, but it might. Oh, and in fact, we don't have, I don't think we need to do a full depth reclamation. We could do an overlay, so it's going to be less than that.
Okay, do you have a second choice besides Clover Lane?
On my top of my head, no. I would like to do Donny Drive, but you're looking like probably $1 million.
Thank you.
Can I hear a little bit more about the realignment project? Because this is a interlocal agreement, right? There's several cities that are joining this bandwagon.
Ultimately, to say yes, I can't. I do know that there's other projects that Fort Worth is working on. Forest Hill and Everman had some of these same projects that's taking place. To indicate it's an alignment with Kennedale, it's really not going that far. So Anglin Road is somewhat separating Forest Hill from us. So to indicate there's an alignment, I'm not sure what that alignment is currently. I do believe there's current plans for Alta Mesa, correct?
Alta Mesa to be extended from 35 all the way to 360.
That's correct.
And I think part of this whole interlocal agreement, it's not like everybody does their part. It's just kind of like Fort Worth is saying, this is our grand vision. And I think with Sublette Road, that would kind of make sense geographically based on the conversations I've had. But I don't think, to my knowledge, after having spoken with Everman and Forest, I don't think they have any concrete plans other than, how is this going to come through here? Because it would impact both of those cities as well. So it's kind of at the preliminary stages. But I think Fort Worth has some concrete plans, but I don't think any of us have seen those yet and how we would be impacted. But the grand vision is to extend Alta Mesa from 35 to 360. I mean, Sublet Road already goes from 360 to here, basically, so.
That's potentially alleviate traffic, or in essence, make a business highway, correct?
That's correct.
Right, Alta Mesa is a 4-lane road with the median.
Yeah.
So I would love to see how that's going to go down Everett Road and have a 4-lane road with the median and then tie into Sublet. Oh,
So essentially, and you probably will only ever hear me say this once, we can agree to do this to secure the funding for the future and kick this down the road a little bit, correct? Because essentially Fort Worth or Everman, they're not ready to do it either?
At this point, you know, obviously I can't speak on the other entities.
Sure.
But it is in front of them to do that. There's a couple of things that it does. The Kennedale alignment will actually go all the way to Little School Road, up to the concrete. So that part of Sublet will be rebuilt from the Kennedale Parkway to Little School Road. So that section will be redone. Mansfield Cardinal will be realigned to, it's not gonna be on the same, where it's currently next to Burger Box. It's gonna move further south. I'm gonna say probably about 300 feet, maybe 400 feet. So it'll have a new intersection. They're wanting, the current design is showing to have a traffic circle at Broadway and New Hope Road. That design is not in stone. We can change it if we want it to look something different, or whatever we want to do, we can create that roadway if we want to do that. That design is just a preliminary. There's no answer to it at this point.
And also I would add that there's concerns with the design, at least I have concerns about how that would impact the cemetery. Don't really want folks' ancestors to be paved over, and then several businesses in town as well as a church. So I would say that, you know, we probably need to really consider the design should this project move forward, just to not negatively impact businesses and especially.
I guess this is where I'm at with that project particularly. We need to fix that 5-lane intersection we have for a long time, so anything that pushes forward that I'm for. Obviously, I would rather do a couple roads that have long time been needing to do, especially if we have the opportunity to do that. At the same time, I don't want to say no to money that we're getting for any project that does help our city in the long run as well. That's why my question is can this be just like the sidewalks project where we're saying yes, and 8 years down the line, it's going to happen? But if we say no now, it's never going to happen.
That's correct.
Well, with Little School Road, I think, you know, we can always revisit that down the future, right? I think the only one we're up against the deadline right now is Sublet by September 30th.
We're going to face that same deadline with Little School Road. They're not going to hold the funding. I mean, we're 3 years in. Generally, we have to answer them within 5 years of whatever the plan is. So to indicate we have 2 more years,
But
would be max.
But it would at least give us a year to continue to talk about it, negotiations, think about funding, whereas we've got like 60 days with Sublet.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I would agree with that too. Like I'm kicking over rocks just like you guys are to try to find more funding for the project. If the timing is on the other one detrimental and it's free money, I'm all for doing that. Whatever would be the minimalistic to approach that, to push that project forward. So if they're asking us just to do designs to accept it, move forward, we should do designs. If they're saying, hey, you know, you need to build it, I think we need to consider that if we're going to secure that money.
Sure. And, you know, so I guess at this point, you know, however this council decides, you know, and again, you know, as Councilman Navarre said, you know, we can, you know, maybe allocate some. For instance, if we went forward with the Sublet design and just said, all right, Little School Road, that buys us some time, knowing that we've got to make a decision in the next year to 18 months and then maybe fix some things that are more pressing as well. I think that's also an option before this council.
But it sounds like we can do it in short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals all in one motion. You've got medium, moderate roads that we can start to repair now so they don't become horrible. Great, short-term vision. Medium-term vision, reline sublet, great. Little road, long-term vision, get the design done, because we've been talking, I haven't been here that long, but I think every other meeting we talk about the little road, and we kind of kick that can down the road a little bit more around the design. To what you said earlier, we have possible sources of funding, but you can't sell an idea. So at least I guess we just get the design done. I see Mr. McMillan is still in the crowd. This does affect him and his property as well. He'd probably like to see some progress on that, as would the rest of the town. So Daryl, just to recap, can we approve both of these tonight? Do we have the funding for both? And then still have money left over for Christian to possibly go do some preventative maintenance on the roads?
Yes, sir.
I'm all for that. As long as these projects help the city, and I think these projects, I think we all agree that we want more sales tax. This realignment does help with that process. It helps with that corner lot over there to allow some big development, maybe town center kind of scenario there. And the realignment also is technically to allow thoroughway of people, which they'll drive down, they'll stop at Burger Box or whatever they are in town. So for me, I'm on board with that.
So, all right, we pay for the design, just thinking out long-term. We pay for the design of Little School Road. We've got it designed. We get reimbursed 50%. How are we going to pay for the rest of the project? Do we, I mean,
Be a budgeted item, or we set for another bond.
But there also could be grant opportunities getting with the railroad and everything else like that, so we can actually probably lower the cost too.
There
I mean,
could be
we
opportunities,
still
yes.
got the state that we can deal with, we still got COG, we got everybody else that, and I feel that, I mean, that's probably a key thing is to have a design saying, hey, this is what we need to build and we're this short and we need your help, you know.
And I think it's the same concept even for the sublet realignment. If the idea is to connect 35 to 360, we are a missing piece to that. At one point, they're going to have to come through Kennedale. So I think that at that point, COG would be have a more interest in funding that roadway than it is currently.
correct, certainly. So, but currently, we pay for the design of the sublet realignment. How are we going to fund the rest of the project? And yes, there could be, but they've not, I mean, you know, in talking with COG, they have not said, yes, we're going to pay X, Y, Z. They've said, could be, maybe, might be, which that's up for us. I mean, that would be up for the city manager to go secure us.
We'll make it happen.
Well, I know, like, like I said, we're kicking off rocks. I'm trying to get a list from our congressman about federal grants to do the train project. And I'm going to hit up Mr. Cook's office, see if we can get a list. So we just need more time to address that, but that doesn't mean we can't, again, have our vision on paper, what it looks like, so we can go beg the federal government or state government for money.
And one thing else it does, it helps us secure the future with that road. You know, ultimately, we may not be able to do it in the next 5 years, but in 20 years, there's a possibility for it, and the growth would be here for that, and we have it already in place for that to take place. I think that's a bigger mark than not doing it at all.
So would this council rather do that and or allocate more of those funds to more current needs, or do you want to plan for the future? I guess that would be the question I would pose to this council.
Well, I look at the design concept for Little Road, if it's $1 million, that was just an estimate.
That's correct.
So if it is $1 million, we're going to get 500,000 back. So that's going to put us, you know, it's 2.6, so we'll end up 2.1. So we're still be able to get some roads done at 2 million. So, and then with the sublet, and I feel like, I know we combined at these and we probably shouldn't have, with the sublet one, I mean, if the county's going to pay for the engineering, you know, that's just another street that will have engineer that we don't have funding for, just like Little Road. New Hope Road, Linda, Peggy, and there's probably about 3 or 4 more that we've engineered and haven't done anything with them, so.
But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be prepared, because we have no idea what the future is. You know, I was raised in a small town in Georgia for a little bit. It was small, less than 3,000, and then all of a sudden they started filming called The Walking Dead, and now it's a bustling town of 10,000 that has tons and tons of money to do projects because of people who want to show up there to see where they filmed it. So we just don't know what happens in the future, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be prepared just in case funding comes out of a transportation bill, it comes out of federal government, and all of a sudden they want to give us $40 million.
Other discussion, questions?
I think I'm with Mr. Glover on the idea, the approach, and Mr. Michaels. We're going to get some money back. I think we can have our cake and eat it too in this scenario.
We would get back, if the design for each comes out at $1 million, we'd still get back 1.5? If it's $1 million for
About
one
$1
and
million.
for the other, then we get back almost, so 2 million out the door there, we would get back 1.5 million.
Well,
quickly.
roughly $1 million, so if it's a 50/50, so if it's 2
Well,
million.
50/50 on Little, 100% on design. Was it 100% design work on Sublet? That's what Friesen Nichols said.
Yeah, the county is going to pay for the 100% for Kennedale Sublet, the realignment.
On
Yeah, so it's
engineering and design.
free money.
Yeah, we just have to agree to show them something in paper by September that we are moving forward with the design, and we need to give them an anticipated end of construction date or something like that.
So, yeah, 1.6.
Do you need a dollar amount from us for a preventative maintenance? It's called the short-term action item. Do you need a dollar amount from us tonight, or do you want to
No.
just come back later?
No, I don't, not tonight.
Mr. Mayor, do you need a motion from us?
If that is the direction this council wants to go, certainly.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to authorize the city manager to move forward with the Little Road Extension Design Project and for the city manager to approve the design work or letter of intention to Tarrant County for the Sublet Road improvements.
Do we have a second?
Mr. Mayor, I second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed with a like sign. The motion passes 3-2, Madam Secretary. How's everybody doing? They need a break, or you want to move forward? Break. Okay, break. You want a break? Let's take a 5-minute break. It's 8:24. We will resume roughly at 8:29. Convene, it is 8:33 PM, and we're going to come to item number 7. We're going to discuss and consider a lease agreement with the YMCA for 2005 West Kennedale Parkway. I will open the floor at this time. I'm sorry,
I'll handle it, I'll make it up. No.
Well, I'm sorry, I just don't have the lease in front of me, so I'm a little back. You should have a YMCA lease in front of you with the city of Kennedale. With the lease, it's a standard lease. At this point, YMCA ultimately has their own blanket insurance that covers any buildings, infrastructure, anything dealing with the building. They have insurance coverage for that. They will also have all utilities, including the internet, water, sewer, all that will be in their name as well. Only thing that's out of the ordinary for say, there will be a $400 lease, monthly payment to the city. That $400 is to cover taxes. And it's on for a 3-year lease.
Excuse me, 3-year lease, correct?
That's correct.
So Darrell, this is the triple net lease that we previously discussed, or this will be a triple net lease with them?
Yes,
In essence, okay.
they're providing all,
They're responsible for everything else.
everything. That's correct.
So the base rent set up on what they would be charged taxes.
That's
So
correct.
we're going to be paying tax on the property. How did we come up with, just because of the base number is,
Through TAD.
okay, through TAD?
Yes, sir.
And this is the 3 years, so of course TAD's going to go up next year.
We'll be able to do the same.
Okay. Because a lot of times, commercial property, it's a lot higher than, I think, what is this, 28 cents a square foot?
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions, discussion?
When would the move-in date be? But if we approve this tonight, when would they be able to move in?
August 1st.
And the existing tenant, where are we going to move them out to?
They will be moving into the mayor's office.
We appreciate your sacrifice.
Not sure where it is. Just kidding.
But a lot of it too is once the fire department remodel happens, we're losing the chief, fire marshal, or fire inspector, and their administrative assistant. So we'll open up 3 offices where we can move the chamber into there too, so.
Correct.
Other questions, other discussion?
No.
For the record, I do know where the mayor's office is. I just felt it would be prudent to offer it up, but
And currently, they're working off-site. They're not in the office at this point. Very limited use.
other questions, discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve this lease agreement with the YMCA for 205 West Kennedale Parkway.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Do we have a second?
I second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? And for the record, all opposed with a like sign. Madam Secretary, the motion passes unanimously. And at this time, I know it's very disappointing to announce, but I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would like to make that motion.
We have a second?
I second.
All right, the meeting is adjourned at 8:38 PM.